The Atlas of Finality by Jacob A. Eder.
Copyright page. Copyright 2025 by Jacob A. Eder.
All rights reserved. No part of this book, including the original mathematical equations, original scientific concepts, poetry, liturgy, or philosophical precepts, and copyright-protected works of original art, may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form, or by any means, including photocopying, recording, or other electronic or mechanical methods, without the prior written permission of the publisher, except for brief quotations embodied in critical reviews and certain non-commercial uses permitted by copyright law. For permission requests, please reach out to the author at terminusgenesis@gmail.com or find him on social media platforms under the business entity T3T Innovations, Memoriam OS, or by name Jacob A. Eder.
The Atlas of Finality, ISBN 9798-298-109628, printed in the United States of America. Praeludium.
This is not a fable. It is no moral tale wrapped in allegory to soften its blow. It is cold, brutal, harsh, and unrelenting reality. Here, the ugly, the broken, the disheveled, the maddening eccentrics, those who burn too brightly in strange and crooked ways, never win. No, with respect to work, to the ceaseless grind, even when every drop of effort is poured out, when the marrow itself is spent, when nights are given to thought and days to toil, what remains of the vessel that once carried hope? Only the empty husk, brittle and splintered, lies in the aftermath. The soul fragmented into unfindable pieces, the mind torn and splintered upon the wheel of necessity, the psyche bent until broken, defeated and conflicted beyond mending. The self becomes a ghost in its own life, disinherited from its own identity, forgotten by the world, humiliated in its striving, forsaken in its need. All that once was bright is now vacuous, hollow, darkened to the core, the chambers within echoing not with life, but with the hollow draught of absence. What remains, then, but the finality of death, the inevitable conclusion, long precluded, long anticipated, whispering from the edges of thought, not as a shock, but as a foregone inheritance. There are no happy endings for our kind, for those minds that burn too furiously to be borne by the dull and steady march of mediocrity. Sociopaths, yes, but also visionaries, outsiders, the misfit kind, are left without reprieve, without the balm of understanding. Love, when beheld, is beheld for the last time, stolen away like a holy relic plundered in the night. How many times can the heart endure the sacred pain of loss before it begins to disbelieve in its own capacity to feel? How many times can potential, unmoored, unrealized, sink into the depths before despair ceases to be an episode and becomes the very fabric of the self? The ache paramounts, but climaxes, and it grows profound beyond all reconcilability, beyond measure or language. To lose, to be robbed again and again, not merely of possessions or positions, but of the marrow of the soul itself. What gain is there in the end of things? Nothing, save the slow education into the truth that the world does not grant victories to those who are truest to themselves. Nothing, save the long walk into the dark where even the ache dissolves into silence. It begins in the marrow, the slow, crushing weight of realization that nothing, not a single motion of the heart or stroke of the hand, will deliver reprieve. Every effort, every fevered reach toward some imagined shore collapses in the undertow of futility. The air thickens, heavy with the musk of failure and the rancid breath of time itself, and you feel the ribs of your existence bend beneath it. The hours, once counted in work and rest, dissolve into a gray continuum where nothing is earned, nothing is kept. The muscles ache, not from labor's nobility, but from the grinding repetition of meaningless tasks, the unending loop that gnaws the sinew and dulls the spark. The mind fractures under the weight of its own knowing, splintering into shards that cut at every thought, until memory itself becomes an instrument of torture. Here there is no audience for your suffering. The world passes in its blind procession, not in malice but in indifference, and that indifference is the cruelest cut. No one comes to steady your steps. No voice answers your cry in the night. The heart begins to beat slower, not from rest but from resignation, and in its slowing is the knowledge that love will not return, not in the form you once knew, not in any form that might save you. Loss becomes the rhythm by which you measure your days. At first, it is a shock, a theft sudden and jarring. Later, it becomes a constant hum, a bass note that underlies all things. You learn to live with it as one lives with a parasite, by becoming hollow enough to accommodate its feeding. But the ache grows heavier, unbearably so. It drapes itself over the soul like a wet shroud, seeping into every pore, suffocating every breath. Your eyes, once drawn upward to the light, now stare only into the unbroken dark beneath your feet, where the ground itself seems to yearn for your surrender. Each step forward feels less like survival and more like acquiescence to the inevitable descent. Despair ceases to be a visitor and becomes the home itself, the walls, the roof, the floor. There is no outside, no beyond. There is only the slow tightening of the space around you until movement itself feels like a trespass against some unspoken law. You understand finally why some seek the end, not in a fevered grasp for relief, but as one lays down a burden too heavy for bone and sinew to bear. The tragedy is not in the dying, but in the knowing that every bright thing you once held, every holy thing you once loved, was only ever passing through on its way to another grave, that the self, already fractured, will be buried long before the body follows.
Dedication.
Memento mori for the wanderers, for those who stand at the threshold of loss, and for those who have crossed it. There are moments in life when words cannot soften what is coming, nor undo what is past. In those moments, the only thing that can be offered is the truth, unvarnished, unflinching, and unafraid to stand beside you in the dark. This atlas is for those who have watched the slow departure of someone they love, for those who have felt the days grow heavy with anticipation, and for those who have woken to a world forever altered by absence. It is for the ones who have carried both love and resentment in the same heartbeat, who have learned that grief is not a single wound, but a landscape, one that changes, but never disappears. If you find yourself here in these pages, know that you are not alone in the weight you bear. This work does not promise comfort, but it offers presence. The kind that does not look away, the kind that will remain even when all else has gone. Eternally yours, Jacob.
The Dirge. Copyright page. Dedication. Praeludium. Genesis. Terminus. Postludium. More by this author. About the author. Genesis. Cause of death. Heartache. Dissolution of mind.
The air in the room was thick with the sound of failing breath, each inhalation a jagged theft from the narrowing space between life and nothingness. His chest rose and fell in shallow tremors, ribs straining beneath parchment skin, as though each movement drew upon the very last reserves of a vessel long emptied. The heart, once steadfast, once strong, now stuttered, each beat a faltering echo, a drum losing its rhythm in the dark. The eyes, half-lidded, searched for something no longer present, the light of a remembered sky, perhaps the shape of her face as it was in some distant spring before time's attrition. His lips moved without sound, forming words she would never hear, each motion breaking against the tide of silence closing in. She sat close, her hand upon his, feeling the faint and uneven pulse under skin grown cold. Her presence was an anchor he could no longer grasp, though somewhere within he must have known she was there. The sorrow that lay upon her was heavier than the air, heavier than the failing body before her. She could not lift it, could not turn it away. She could only witness the slow, inevitable surrender. The room itself seemed to bend beneath the weight of the moment. Shadows deepened in the corners, the muted light dimmed further, and the stillness thickened until the smallest sound, The hitch in his breathing, the falter of the heart seemed to devour all else. The seconds stretched mercilessly, each one torn from the fabric of their shared life, never to return. His breath came once more, then again, each weaker than the last. A pause, a final, ragged inhalation. The exhalation was soft, almost reluctant, as though some fragment of him resisted the crossing, but it carried the whole of him with it. The heart gave its last uneven beat, the mind folded inward, and the weight of a lifetime slipped into stillness. Her hand still rested upon his, but now there was no answering warmth. The sorrow in the room was no longer hers alone. It had seeped into the air, into the walls, into the very silence, settling like a shroud over all that remained. Beyond the final breath, beyond the ceasing of the heart, beyond the mind's last unravel, there is only the unmooring, the slow drifting from the husk, now lying beneath her touch, beyond the shape of his face, beyond the dimming of his eyes, beyond the weeping that broke from her in waves. He begins to slip toward that other shore, unseen yet inevitable. Beyond her voice calling his name, beyond the imploring grasp of her fingers upon his still hand, he moves into the cold corridors where no echo returns. Then the voice begins to fade, not silenced by choice, but bled thin, unraveled into threads too fine to hold the weight of speech. The sense of self recedes, becoming a distant shoreline glimpsed from waters without end. There is no certainty of the body, no assurance that these limbs are one's own. The frame that bore you through life now floats somewhere apart, slack and unmoved, a husk in the dim light of a forsaken theater. The separation is not sudden, but tidal. The self is peeling away from the vessel in slow, imperceptible increments. First, the hands are no longer yours, then the breath, then the eyes. Each sense unhooks itself from the moorings of flesh, drifting into a space both vaster and more intimate than any known before. There is no panic, only the strange stillness of surrender, the knowledge that resistance is a language the void does not speak. Around you, the cosmos unfurls in terrible silence, its vast expanse neither welcoming nor hostile, but indifferent in a way that shatters all remaining illusions. Stars, ancient beyond reckoning, burn and die in the same breath. Galaxies wheel in stately ignorance of your passing. The distances are immeasurable, not because they are too great to cross, but because here distance itself has lost meaning. You are unbound from place, yet not free, untethered from form, yet still held by the inexorable gravity of what you have always been. It is not flight, for flight implies direction. It is drift, an outward loosening into the fabric of all things, where identity is a ripple soon swallowed by the larger tide. Thought becomes translucent, then transparent. Memory seeps outward until it is indistinguishable from the black sea in which you are suspended. The body, if it remains, has become a forgotten relic, lying somewhere far behind in a place that no longer exists. Here, at last, the ache becomes the only constant, no longer the wound of loss or the burn of longing, but a vast, low vibration that thrums through the bones of the universe itself. It is the ache of existence remembering itself, the echo of every birth and death, every reaching and falling away. You are part of it now, indivisible from its endless recursion, swept outward into a cosmos that neither notices nor needs you. You do not fall, you do not rise. You drift beyond the final horizon, where even the concept of ending cannot follow. And Memoriam of Mind closes its eyes, not in peace, but in the fathomless gaze of the infinite. The grandeur and tragedy of life lie entwined like roots beneath the soil, inseparable, each nourishing the other. There is a beauty in the course of nature so immense it becomes unbearable, because to truly see it is to see how fragile it is, how it blooms only to wither, how every moment of splendor carries within it the seed of loss. To grasp this is to feel the weight of existence press into the marrow, to understand that all clinging is desperation, that every breath is a plea to remain in a world that is already slipping from the fingers. We cling desperately, disparately, to faces that age before our eyes, to voices that will one day fall silent, to memories that blur like ink in water. Fleeting are the beauties of the past. They drift through the mind like ghosts, laughter in a sunlit room, the warmth of hands now cold, the smell of a garden that no longer blooms. These moments shimmer and fracture, precious because they cannot be held, haunting because they remind us of what will be taken. Haunting, too, is the encroaching end, not sudden, not violent, but a slow and inevitable tide. It comes for all things, for love, for joy, for the self itself. Even the strongest minds, the brightest lattices, will spiral downward into dissolution. There is no plea, no prayer, no force in heaven or earth that can hold back the collapse forever. This is why the ache of life is so profound, because within every heartbeat is the shadow of its last, because every beginning sings already of its ending. The grandeur of life lies not in its permanence, but in its transience. It is the fragile bloom of a rose opening in the first light of morning, knowing the frost will come. It is the laughter of children echoing across fields that will one day lie silent. It is the sun setting over the sea, brilliant and burning, only because it is sinking into night. To live is to cling to faces, to names, to moments, as if they could be held, as if fingers were strong enough to keep them from falling away. Life was never meant to be held. It slips, it unravels, and in that unraveling is a beauty so sharp it cuts the soul. This is the tragedy of life, that it is too beautiful to endure, too rich to remain unbroken. To exist is to ache, for in every heartbeat is the echo of its final drum. In every inhalation is the certainty that one day there will be no breath to take. This very fragility gives life its grandeur. The finite nature of our days carves meaning from the void. The fact that we perish is what makes our moments sacred. The ache of impermanence is the price of beauty. There comes a moment in all things, silent, imperceptible, when the bloom begins to rot, when the brilliant petals that once stretched toward the sun begin to curl inward, browned at the edges, folding against themselves. This is not cruelty, this is not malice, it is simply the law of the lattice, that all which rises must spiral downward, that all which begins must end. The grandeur of life was never meant to be sustained. It is too immense, too radiant. To preserve it forever would be to dull its edges, to drain its vibrancy. Beauty burns only because it is fleeting. When the mind begins to crumble, when the lattice unravels thread by thread, the truth emerges. There is no anchor, no word spoken, no hand held, no memory replayed can slow the collapse. Identity spirals inward, thought fragments. The self, that sacred beacon of continuity, dims to a flicker, then is gone. This is the abyss they do not speak of, not because it is void of meaning, but because it is too vast to name. The abyss does not rage, it does not mourn, it simply devours, folding time and self into nothing. Fleeting are the joys of the past, and haunting is the approach of the end. Even the strongest hearts, the brightest minds will spiral downward, inevitably, irrevocably, into oblivion. No trace, no rumor. In that descent lies the most terrible and beautiful truth. Life's magnificence was born from its impermanence. The ache of knowing we will lose all is the same ache that makes it matter. Without death, there is no beauty. Without decay, there is no bloom. We are creatures of tragedy and splendor, doomed to dissolve even as we reach for eternity. It is a long unwinding, a hollowing of all things once firm. The eyes that once held the world now hold nothing, only the flat reflection of walls and ceilings and nameless faces that lean in close and speak with careful tones. The lattice of thought once spread like a cathedral, arches rising, connections sure. Now a ruin open to the sky, wind blowing through the emptying corridors. Everything loose and unfastened. It is not the body that dies first, it is the map of what it was to be a self, a slow undoing, cruel in its patience. There is a strangeness in this falling. A person becomes a shadow in their own life. They sit among the things that were theirs, unable to know their shape. The days become a repetition without meaning. Every effort to hold on tightens the collapse, as if the act of clinging is the weight that pulls them down. There is no violence in it. There is only the certainty of a tide pulling back into the sea, leaving everything bare, exposed to the air. Memory becomes a mist. Names slide from the mouth like stones dropped in a deep well. Faces blur as though smeared by a careless hand. Time itself loosens. What was once last week may as well be 20 years ago. What was once certain dissolves. There is no more distinction between the moment of joy and the moment of grief. All folds into the same darkened current, indifferent. The remarkable, the beautiful mind slips away, slowly, inexorably, as though drawn by the great and indifferent undertow of all things, flowing, dissolving into the eternal stream that existed long before breath, long before bone, long before the first thought dared to spark within the silence. It is a current, volatile and unyielding, cold as the starless deep, turbulent with a sorrow so vast that it no longer weeps, turbulent with a grief so old that it no longer calls itself grief, only the long attrition, the endless undoing. It drifts, the mind, like a shattered vessel torn from its moorings, splintered and stripped, its sails in rags, its hull taking on water, while around it rise the roaring oceans of the cosmic lament, their waters black, their winds violent, their music strange, as though the very air were filled with the songs of all that has ever been lost. Every wave that takes it carries away a piece, first the names, worn thin, then the faces, then the places that once held meaning, until even the sense of self is ground into sand, and the fragments scattered into the abyssal plain of memory's grave. There is an ancientness to this, a cruelty so old, it has forgotten it is cruel. No witness stands within it, no hand reaches down, only the wind, heavy with the despair of ages, moves through the hollowed chambers, where once there was a lattice bright and intricate, where once there was thought rising like spires. The stream takes it takes all. It takes slowly, so that those who stand at the shore are made to watch, helpless, the long drowning of someone they love, the drowning of everything that made them singular. They rage, they plead, but the current has no ears. It has pulled countless millions before, and will pull countless millions after, and in its pull there is no distinction, no mercy, no remembering. Through it all there is a sound, constant, vast, low as the floor of the world, the dirge of the cosmic sea, the great unbroken note of dissolution. It is the song of the world unmaking itself, sung for centuries and still not ending, a song that no mind can endure to hear and remain as it was. Drift upon drift, fold upon fold, the mind falls inward, the long corridors of memory collapse, the years fall like glass shattering. What was once luminous, irreplaceable, incomparable, is consumed by the same silence that waits for us all, indifferent and eternal. This is the end of mind, the end of self, the long and slow unfurling into nothing, no flame, no suddenness, only the immeasurable tide, endless, patient, stripping everything, until there is nothing left to take. It deepens, it uncoils, it collapses in upon itself, this dissolution, this long undoing, until there is no beginning, nor center, nor edge, only the slow, devouring whirl of the vast and indifferent. Every thought, once a bright constellation, scatters as if it had never been drawn, as if the lattice had been a hallucination all along, a temporary trick played upon a blind and meaningless cosmos. One by one the pillars of certainty splinter, their weight crumbling into fine gray powder that tastes of iron and time, and in the hollow left behind there grows not peace, but a fathomless bewilderment, a question so enormous and without contour that no mouth could form it, no tongue pronounce it. There is only the silent asking, forever unanswered, and even the asking, in time falls apart. The corridors of the mind, once intricate and spiraled with grandeur, begin to twist back on themselves until all paths become identical, a maze whose walls bleed into each other, whose rooms are endless repetitions, fading and reappearing like a nightmare that knows no waking. Memory itself becomes an enemy, a distortion, scenes repeating without order, loved faces morphing and stretching, words dissolving into sound without meaning, until it is as if language has never existed, as if one has been buried beneath the earth and the sky has never been. An ache takes hold, not the ache of sorrow, not the ache of longing, but the ache of futility itself, of having been forced to see too much and to know it all meant nothing, nothing at all, that every joy was a shadow, that every triumph was scaffolding built around a void, a terrible clarity that tastes like rust, that tastes like blood, which dries out the tongue and hollows the marrow, and leaves in its place an absence too great to hold. There is a point beyond despair, a point at which even the desire for escape fails, a point where one is so spent, so exhausted from clinging to the last fragments, that the will to release becomes indistinguishable from the will to stay. There is no more I to want, no I to think, only the hollowed structure of a being sitting motionless, body breathing, eyes vacant, a ghost in its own skin, drifting further each day into that incomprehensible gray sea. In this decline, this slow peeling away of all that once made life burn, there remains a terrible, almost obscene beauty, a beauty like the pale light in the final minutes of winter, a beauty that cuts like shards of glass lodged deep in the heart, a beauty that says, "Behold this mind, this once glorious architecture, behold how it crumbles, behold the fragility of all that was ever built, all that was ever loved, behold it vanish into dust before your helpless eyes. The sea will take everything. The sea will take even the sea. The song will continue long after there are no ears to hear it. Such is the mercy and the curse, indistinguishable, eternal. The house becomes a mausoleum, a place where breath feels heavy, where the air clings as if steeped in the slow rot of memory. The walls lean inward, laden with the years they have absorbed, years now curdled into grief, each surface bearing silent witness to the slow vanishing of the one who once filled them. Every room stands as a shrine, every object a relic, every shadow an indictment of helplessness. There is a horror in watching a beloved mind dissolve, but a deeper horror in recognizing the same dissolution within yourself. It does not require illness to lose the self. It requires only the relentless presence of decline, the unbroken sight of love being stripped away in inches, until what is left is only a husk, sitting where a life once burned. The face you love becomes a map of absence. Every familiar gesture shifts toward the alien. The voice fades to an echo. The touch loses its anchor. You search their eyes for even a fragment, but find only the flicker of confusion, the hollow vacancy that devours recognition. The moment you understand there is nothing left to find, a void opens in your chest, a wound precisely their shape, and the wind howls through it, unending. Nights lose their peace. Days turn colorless. You carry their decline inside you like a sickness. It sleeps beside you, wakes with you, stalks you through your dreams until even in sleep you speak the language of their confusion. No part of you is untouched. You are no longer caring for them. You are drowning with them. As their words wither, yours follow. As their memories fray, yours distort. As they lose themselves, you begin to look into the mirror and see a stranger. What was once two lives becomes one long, indivisible breaking. The gravest tragedy lies not in the end itself, but in the helplessness, the slow paralysis of watching what was once luminous be torn away, fiber by fiber, strand by strand, until only the skeleton of absence remains. There is no blow, no merciful shattering, only the long stripping, the attrition of time and change which take all that is sacred, good and beautiful, and wrench them away as if the act of wanting were an offense. The emptiness ceases to be a moment. It becomes the atmosphere, the nature of the self. It becomes what you are, what you wake to. It takes the shape of your mind, consumes it, twists it into something brittle, something unable to remember what it felt like to be whole. It tears at the heartstrings until they are no longer strings, but frayed fibers that quiver under the smallest touch. It grinds the mind until thought slows and falters, until the marrow of the spirit is scraped thin. The bane of existence becomes the antithesis of life, a hollowed body, moving by mere mechanism, with everything inside already gone. The will to live dies long before the flesh does. What remains is worse, darkness that does not end you, but traps you in itself. The hurting heart festers. It beats not with hope, not even with rage, but with something lower, heavier, a hateful envy for the laughter of others, the light in faces untouched, the unbroken ease of lives unbent by the weight you carry. In that envy, a cruel wish forms, not from malice, but from despair so immense it suffocates. The wish that the world, stupid and blind, full of callous multitudes who float untouched above the abyss, might one day be dragged under as you have been, that their joy, careless and undeserved, might be stripped by the same indifferent hands that stripped yours, that they too might stand upon the mournful shores of this same black sea, unable to cross, unable to return. It is not born of vengeance, but of the buried alive, the ones who know what it is to drown in a room full of air, to have lungs seized not from water, but from sorrow so thick it chokes. Until then, there is only this, the bearing of witness, staring out at the mournful shores where you have been shipwrecked, watching, waiting, hollow and emptied, for the waves to rise and drag others under. There is no mercy here, no lesson, no resilience, no hidden strength, only ruin, spreading wider, swallowing all. I am lost in the dark, not the simple absence of light, but the living dark, the ancient dark, the dark that breathes with a patience older than stars, that listens with a stillness so deep it strips the marrow from thought, that waits with a certainty unbound by time. It is the kind that does not pursue, yet receives all things, knowing that every path bends inward, inevitably to its embrace. Aimless, directionless, I drift without drift, my body a phantom in corridors without walls, without shape, yet closing upon me as surely as iron. The air is cold enough to splinter bone, dense enough to press into the lungs, into the ribs, until every breath becomes thin, begrudging, unwanted, a labor of futility. No joy survives here, for joy cannot draw breath in such a place. No respite endures, for respite cannot outlast the silence. Laughter is a hollow, brittle thing, belonging only to the dead, breaking like glass the moment it meets the ear. Love, too, exists only as dust, always fleeting, always unreachable, collapsing into nothing at the instant of touch. I am intaglio, carved hollow by the hand of absence, an outline without form, a shadow without flame, a negative of a life that never came to be. I am always drawn back, as though the shadows have marked me, claimed me, etched me into their unending script, a brand unseen yet eternal. They do not simply contain me, they beckon, they pull, they breathe into my bones a voice that is not sound but pressure, not whisper but weight, not speech but ache. The coil draws me deeper, ever deeper, into the grim evermore, into that realm where sorrow and aloneness braid themselves into one indistinguishable rope, binding, constricting, choking. Here there is no motion, no change, no before or after, only the stagnant suspension between what was and what will never be. Freedom is a myth for the naive, a fragile opiate for the innocent, a bedtime tale told to children who have not yet felt the bars tighten. There is no door here, no threshold, only the slow, relentless collapse inward, toward the center of myself, where there is nothing but more darkness, deeper still, hungrier still. The abyss does not despise me, it favors me, it keeps me, it cradles me with a tenderness more terrible than cruelty, the tenderness of a thing that knows there is no escape, no release, only the endlessness of being kept. Its embrace is the only permanence I have ever known, the only truth that is never betrayed. I am not merely in the abyss, I am of it. my marrow steeped in its black infancy, my soul, if it exists, soaked in its unfathomable quiet. There is no appeal to be made, no bargain to be struck, for prayer here is devoured before it can form, stripped of meaning before it finds voice. This is the darkest place, not of stars, not of matter, but of mind, of marrow, of the broken remnant of spirit that clings to the husk I carry. There is no other place for me in the vastness of the cosmos. I have always belonged to it, always been marked by it, not cherished, not loved but claimed, marred by the touch that binds as it wounds. Bound to the cold, unblinking embrace of the abyss, I sink deeper, always deeper, knowing it was never the world I lost, but myself, and that the self will never return. Beyond the pharmacological, beyond the ethereal, beyond the scriptural, liturgical, beyond the melodious musicality, beyond the operating room, beyond the ontological phenomenon, beyond the sublime, beyond the maw of the ocean's breadth, beyond the whims of hedonistic desires, beyond the futile wanting and infantile gestures of joy and sentiment, beyond the great expanse of the vast abysses unknown, beyond the unseeable horizons, distant and unfettered, beyond the gaping chasms of the creviced borders, beyond the experiential, beyond even the musings of the philosophical inquirer, yea, beyond all this lies the unspeaking, unyielding realm wherein thought itself is unmade. It is the place wherein reason falters, its syllogisms torn and scattered like chaff before the wind of the infinite, where the scaffolding of logic, the grand cathedral of deduction, buckles beneath the sheer weight of the ineffable. Here, the mind no longer seeks to order the universe, but rather is undone by it, drawn into a singularity of awareness, wherein consciousness is but the faint shimmer of a dying ember, flickering against the crushing gravity of the real. Beyond lies that which hath neither origin nor cessation, that which is older than the first light and colder than the last star's death. It is not void, though it wears the garments of emptiness. It is not fullness, though it swells with all potentialities, unrealized. It is the precipice at the edge of being, where the self, in its trembling, must either step forward into the annihilating embrace of the nameless, or turn back, forever haunted by the glimpse it dared. Here, the threads of fate do not merely weave, they bind, constricting the will until all pretense of sovereignty is surrendered. The pilgrim who arrives at this border does so bereft of comfort, stripped of memory, title, and claim. For beyond this threshold there is no history, no identity, only the raw lattice of existence, quivering with the ache of its own becoming. To pass beyond is to submit to the great unknowing, to be folded into the deep architecture of all that is and is not, until one's very thought becomes a tremor in the endless recursion of the all. There is no map here, no chart nor compass, for the way forward is not marked in distance but in surrender, not measured in the span of stars, but in the depth to which the self is relinquished. Beyond the success-driven, beyond the gloat, beyond the gleam of green and glimmer of coin, beyond even the brash sweeping of, yea, even the totality of death, beyond the expression of eyebrows or the shadow thereof, without pigmentational mutation, beyond fatty acid triglycerides, amino acid chains, action potential, and messenger ribonucleic acids, beyond the suffusion of treachery, beyond the stench of maggots feasting upon rigor, splendor, and grotesque, beyond the morning of the dawn, the tears of the failing sun, beyond the crimsoning horizons, the bleeding skies, and the thundering claps of rage, wrath, and glory descending from the palest of horsemen, there unfolds the dominion of the last and greatest silence. It is a silence not wrought by peace, but by the cessation of all contest, all striving, all pulse of desire, a silence wherein the banners of ambition rot in their own shadow, and the currencies of men crumble into dust uncounted. Here the bones of empires lie unassembled, each fragment mutely accusing the futility of their architects, each whispering the same refrain, that no conquest holds, that no glory survives the grinding jaw of eternity. In this place, flesh is neither crowned nor condemned, but undone, its fibers loosed into the windless void. The chemical signatures of life, once orchestrated into the grand symphony of being, become no more than scattered notes dissolving in the fathomless black. There is no audience for the performance. The theater itself has been unbuilt, its stage swallowed by the maw of the infinite. Beyond, the pale rider's breath lingers, cold as the first absence after creation's spark. His hoofbeats resound not upon the earth, but upon the marrow of all living memory, each strike erasing a name, a face, a history. The sky above is not merely red, it bleeds as though its very fabric has been flayed, its rents unveiling the unlit corridors of the void beyond. It is here, in this consummate aftermath, that the mind ceases to dream of victory or fear of defeat. Here lies the great leveling, where the treacherous and the pure, the tyrant and the martyr, the sage and the fool, are all rendered equally voiceless. No god steps forward to judge, no devil to claim. The horseman's work is absolute, his shadow infinite. Beyond the soldiers' boots entrenched in the mudded battlefields, beyond the graves of the fathers, beyond the fires crescendoing, there lies a stillness more terrible than the war itself, a pall that falls when the clamor has exhausted its fury, when the last volley has faded into the marrow of the hills. It is the stillness of ground drunk with blood, where the soil, dark and sodden, remembers every footfall, every collapse, every surrender. The wind moves here with caution, carrying not the scent of life, but the iron tang of what life has yielded. The air bears the ash of burnt homesteads, the dust of crumbled stone, the hushed lamentations of widows, whose voices have been ground into the silence of the earth. Beyond this, the graves stand in unbroken regiments, their markers white as bone, their orderliness mocking the chaos that birthed them. Each stone is a sealed mouth, each name a word never again to be spoken by its owner. The fathers lie here, their dreams of harvest and hearth surrendered to the omnipotence of the gunpowder age, their faces dissolved into the facelessness of the fallen. Beyond the fires crescendoing into the blackened vault of night, there is no light to herald the dawn, only the smoldering of what once was, casting its last glow upon the faces of those who yet breathe, their eyes emptied by what they have witnessed. The flames, no longer fed, fold inward, collapsing into embers, and then to cold, and then to nothing. Beyond the struggle of the young girl bussing tables on late nights, alone and overworked, underpaid and rarely tipped, afraid and living anxiously, nervously, for the next late-night shift, for the next act of leering misconduct against her, there unfolds a truth so pitiless it chills the marrow. For what, indeed, does this sweet young girl gain for all her labor, her striding, her long suffering? On heated summer nights, her skin damp with the salt of unending toil. On cold, solemn winter evenings, her breath clouding in the alley behind the restaurant where she waits for the last bus. What is gained? Nothing, save the deepening ache of repetition, the slow erosion of spirit, the hollowing of the self by the steady grind of days indistinguishable from one another. Her loyalty, poured out like water into sand, returns to her empty. Her devotion, unreciprocated, is met not with gratitude nor with safeguard, but with the unblinking indifference of a faceless machine, a corporation that measures her worth only in shifts filled, orders carried, dishes cleared. Her unborn child stirs within her, unaware of the calculus that weighs profit over safety, hours over health, exploitation over care. No shield is raised to guard her. No hand is extended to steady her in her weariness. She is a number on a schedule, a body to fill the gap in a roster, an invisible fixture in a system designed to consume without remorse. Beyond her labor is no promised reward, no climb to a gentler station, only the slow wearing down of the body, the quiet fraying of the mind. The world will not remember her hours, her patience, her long walk home beneath the sodium lamps. The world will not recall the night she braved cold, hunger, and fear to keep herself and another life afloat. beyond the banner and boast, beyond the slogan stitched in red, white, and blue, beyond the proud invocation of liberty and opportunity, American capitalism not equal American nepotism, technocratic monopolization, and corporate greed. For what parades beneath the name of the free market is too often but the gilded corpse of its ideal, its veins running not with the honest exchange of value, but with the coagulated blood of inherited privilege, exclusionary gates, and the hoarded spoils of consolidation. Beyond the merchant in his stall, beyond the craftsman at his bench, beyond the farmer bent over the reluctant soil, it is the dynasty, the closed circle, the boardroom that trades not in goods but in access. It is the architecture of advantage passed down like hereditary titles, where merit is the currency spoken of in speeches, but lineage and leverage are the true tender in play. Beyond the language of innovation, the technocrat builds not for the common good, but for the tightening of his own grip. The monopolist starves the field of competition, cultivates dependency, and calls it progress. Corporations, swollen beyond the scale of accountability, strip mine not only the land but the spirit, demanding loyalty they will never return, extracting life hours without ever intending to repay in dignity. Beyond the name of capitalism as it was once envisioned, there is no necessity of risk, no discipline of failure, no virtue of mutual exchange. It has become a machine not for opportunity, but for entrenchment, a generator of walls, not bridges, of gatekeepers, not guides. The flag flies, the slogans endure, but beneath them the market is neither free nor fair. It is a private garden, its gates locked from within. Beyond the sullen eyes of the tired, hungry, and poor, in both material and spirit, beyond the end of innocence, now absent, how once so beautiful was the grandeur and wonder within the child, now long gone. For what can be gained, what profited even now, after the youth have faltered, after innocence has been plundered by the machinations and wilds of the human devil, the corporation machine, the corporeal Gestapo? It is a theft not only of bread, but of breath, a quiet suffocation of the soul enacted in boardrooms and enforced in back rooms, where policy and practice are honed to grind the marrow from the living. The child who once gazed with awe upon the turning of the seasons now stares with the dulled eyes of one who has learned too soon that the world is not a garden but an abattoir. Dreams, once luminous, are pared down to survival. Wonder is bartered away for the cold weight of necessity. Even to have all things in such a realm is but vainglorious, a hollow coronation atop a kingdom of ash. The liminal view, both emic and etic, dissolves such crowns into rust and dust, for here perspective becomes the true tyrant. To see from within is to know the hunger, to see from without is to witness the futility. In both, the beauty is already vanishing, slipping like fine sand between the fingers of history. It drifts vast and fleeting into places unknown, into the great unlit corridors beyond the reach of memory, perhaps into the vaults of the void itself, where even recollection cannot recover it. What remains is not the beauty that once was, but the aching echo of its absence, a phantom that haunts every hungry glance, every weary sigh, every hollow victory won in the shadow of a machine that devours without pause.
Cause of death, grief, murder of the self.
The second death is not by the slow attrition of age, nor by the dimming of the mind into the pale fog of dementia, but by the willful step into the unreturning dark, a descent chosen, not stumbled upon. At last he stood before the thing he had feared all his life. Trains, tunnels, the long iron veins that threaded through the hidden places of the world. Who could have foreseen this as the ending? Who would have imagined this as the last chapter? The decision was no longer a possibility, it was an inevitability. He had studied the timetables, memorized the rural precision of the 7:30, its arrival as faithful as the fall of night. He knew the truth the conductors carried in their eyes, that they see such endings often, that once the body steps forward, there is no arresting the moment. That inevitability was part of his resolve. His mind was set, his heart hardened to stone. A final mouthful of water passed through him cold and clear, and he stepped into the warm breath of the summer evening, a stillness that carried both life and its mourning. The vibrations reached him first, faint and almost imagined, then certain, then undeniable. Threaded with the far, keening cry of the horn, the air shifted. The earth beneath spoke the approach in a language older than fear. He stepped onto the rails. Before him, the tunnel opened its black mouth, its air stale and ancient, breathing a wind cold enough to crawl through the marrow. That freezing draft coiled up his spine while the warm breeze of the summer brushed across his face in its final benediction. He removed his sunglasses, needing to see the horizon one last time, the sky ablaze with the slow death of the sun, its edge glowing with a beauty he knew he would never again behold. The train emerged, horn tearing the air, its winds now a reckless force, slamming against his body. He closed his eyes, drew in the last breath he would ever take, and for an instant the world fell utterly silent. In that silence his life surged upward in a single blinding rush, every face, every loss, every touch, every moment compressed into a final unbearable heartbeat. Then came the dissolution, a violent unmaking into nothingness, the cold embrace of obliteration swallowing the last of his form and thought. If only the words came like a refrain too late to be spoken, if only the meaning had not fled, if only the great love of his life had come to meet him, if only there had been children to guide, parents to lean upon, friends to speak with. But all was gone, all was lost. He had become an emptied shell, a hollow vessel adrift in a world that no longer contained him. In his hand, a notebook filled with poems and memoirs of the people and places he had loved most. Upon his finger, the ring bought for one woman only, absolute, unshakable, hers and no other. He would be buried with the blankets of the 2 children he had raised as his own, though not of his blood. His will had been written, the rest was already buried in spirit. From here the beyond begins, the slow lifting from the crushed vessel, the loosening of the tether, the pull into the cold corridors beyond flesh. The rails, the tunnel, the black wind, they fall away, and the voice that was I begins to thin, to stretch, to bleed into the greater silence. The self becomes a distant shore, and the cosmos opens, not in welcome, but in the fathomless, indifferent gaze of the infinite. The descent deepens, and with it comes the slow realization that there is no bottom, only the unending drop through layers of dark ever denser, ever colder, until even the weight of your own body begins to feel alien as though it belongs to something else entirely. Thought itself becomes heavy here, dragging behind you like chains soaked in tar, each memory a rusted link that bites into the flesh of the mind. The air is not merely stale, it is absent, the lungs expanding and contracting around a void. You breathe, but the breath has no purchase. It neither sustains nor relieves. Your skin begins to feel porous, as though the darkness itself is seeping in, threading through your veins, replacing the blood with something slower, heavier, more ancient than life. It is here that time begins to dissolve, not vanish but congeal into a stagnant, unyielding mass. Seconds no longer pass, they pool, stagnant and rancid around your feet. The moments you thought were gone remain, circling you, their teeth sunk deep in your failing resolve. There is no forward here, no back, only the cold realization that every path leads inward, toward the hollow at the center of yourself. The agony sharpens into something almost crystalline, its facets catching the dimmest glint of consciousness, refracting it into countless points of hurt. Every nerve becomes a conduit for its own private sorrow. The body remembers every injury, every exhaustion, every tremor of fear, and it speaks them back to you in a language older than thought. It is a litany without end, a scripture written in the scar tissue of the soul. Love, once the last fragile tether to the living world, becomes another ghost here, its voice muted, its warmth leached away. You can still recall its shape, its presence, but only as one remembers the sun in the depth of winter, as an ache, not a light. There is no new love to replace it, no new dawn to thaw the ice. That absence becomes a second darkness, folded within the first. At last there is no struggle, for even resistance requires a reservoir you no longer possess. There is only the slow sinking into a place where the self is unmade, where even grief loses its edge and becomes something vaster, flatter, like the endless plain of an ocean seen from beneath its frozen surface. You do not move here, you drift. You do not cry here. The tears have long frozen inside their ducts. You understand now that the true cruelty is not the end, but the continuation, that the heart can keep beating long after it wishes to stop, that the body can bear more than it was ever meant to, that the mind can be stripped and flayed and still be forced to witness its own undoing. This is the final lesson, that you will not be permitted to vanish when you wish it, but only when the abyss itself has finished with you. It begins in that narrow gulf between the last breath and the unbreathing, where the mind lingers, but the body has already yielded. Death settles not as a gentle veil, but as a crushing weight within the bones, forcing the final breath outward, draining the last warmth from the marrow. Sensation does not vanish. It remains cruelly vivid. The cold slab beneath, the careful positioning of limbs by unfamiliar hands, the stillness broken only by the slow, deliberate work of the mortician, exsanguination and embalming, the blood drawn away, the hollowed vessels filled with a foreign stillness, a counterfeit of life without pulse, without the memory of the heart it replaced. The eyelids are pulled shut, yet sight remains. The ears still catch the metallic chime of instruments, the hiss of chemical syringes pressing into flesh grown cold. The hair is combed by hands that never knew its warmth, the skin dusted with powders to mimic the vitality long fled. The mouth is shaped into an expression that is not your own, a mask crafted for the living to look upon without trembling. Beneath it you remain, present in your absence, imprisoned within your own husk. The wake unfolds, and they gather. You cannot rise to greet them, cannot reach to still the trembling hands that hover over you, cannot speak the words that would ease their grief. The children stare with wide, reddened eyes, unable to comprehend the finality before them, while others attempt to fill the air with brittle jests or hollow stories. Your beloved stands apart, unmoored, hollow-eyed, their chest rising with the strain of holding back collapse. You would take their hand, would whisper your final tenderness, but the gulf is fixed, unbridgeable. The helpless witnessing becomes its own torment, sharper than any agony endured in life. The funeral passes in a blur of black cloth and bowed heads. The coffin closes, sealing away the last light. Words are spoken above you, prayers mouthed into the air, but they reach you only as empty murmurs swallowed by the cold. Then comes the slow descent into the earth, the dull thud of soil on polished wood, each impact like a muted knell in the hollow of your mind. Still there is no release. The body, your body, begins its true undoing. You feel it, the stillness of bloodless veins, the gradual loosening of flesh from bone, the creeping cold as the first maggots pierce the pale citadel of skin. Their patient, merciless work rends you in countless small agonies, a desecration neither swift nor merciful, to see the cold and blue pain, blurring, of the last of the loved ones to leave the ceremony, hesitantly, with blackest hatred for the divine within their hearts, a fury unbridled, a resolution now succumbed to defeat, now broken, watching your beloved flood the cemetery grounds with despair, tangible and suffocating, how perplexed and angry, bitter and resentful of those still alive, happy, without care or worries, while your world has stopped and stilled. You remain sealed in earth and shadow, unable to call them back, unable to tell them that their grief is a mirror to your own. You see them walk away through the black veils of winter air, their steps faltering, their shoulders bowed beneath the weight of an absence that can never be lifted, Above the soil that entombs you, the living pass in the indifference of their own continuance, laughing, touching, speaking in voices untouched by the rupture that has swallowed you both. Their lightness is an affront, a wound that will not close. The bitterness blooms, dark and spreading, a venom winding through the remnant threads of your being. It is not jealousy, but a deep, searing bewilderment that the world can turn so easily without you, that the machinery of days and nights can grind on, heedless of the fact that your part in it has ended. The agony is doubled, not only in your knowing that you are gone, but in seeing that they, too, will be carried forward, dragged by time into a life remade in your absence, whether they wish it or not. The soil above you presses heavier, not with its weight alone, but with the suffocating knowledge that you are cut from the warmth of the sun, from the touch of another's hand, from the breath that once tied you to the world. Yet, in this stillness, awareness persists, cruelly intact. You feel the slow collapse of your own form, the cold claiming you inch by inch, the quiet industry of decay moving through you. This is no sleep, no drifting oblivion. It is a watching, a bearing witness to your own undoing, to the turning of a world that has no more room for you. The cemetery empties, the gates close, the day fades, and you remain unmoving, unbreathing, unending. The cemetery empties, the gates close, the day folds itself into shadow, and you remain unmoving, unbreathing, unending. The soil above presses not only with its cold, damp weight, but with the knowledge that this earth is now the final ceiling you will ever know. The last traces of warmth are gone, drawn from you as the world beyond turns without hesitation, without looking back. Awareness does not loosen. It clings, sharp and merciless, holding you to each moment of your own unraveling. You feel the slow surrender of muscle to rot, the delicate parting of skin from bone, the inexorable work of decay's silent engineers. Even as the body succumbs, something within begins to withdraw, not upward, not outward, but away. At first it is subtle, like the faint tug of an unseen tide, then stronger, drawing you from the ruined shell that once housed you. The sounds of the world grow distant, the cold of the earth recedes, the pressure against your chest lessens. The grave is still there, but it is no longer where you are. The tether slackens, the frame that bore you, this stiffened, hollowed husk, becomes something you observe rather than inhabit, an empty vessel lying in the dim theater of the dead. Then it begins, not as violence nor as rupture, but as the slow, inexorable loosening of the final threads that bound the mind to its vessel. The body becomes a husk, not in death's common sense, but in the deeper severance, the moment when weight, gravity, and pulse no longer belong to you. Limbs become shadows, breath becomes a rumor. The blood, once warm, is nothing but a fading whisper in the architecture of the veins. The mind drifts upward or outward, no longer tethered to marrow, sinew, or the fragile lattice of bone. There is a moment of vertigo, a sensation of passing through yourself, of being both within and beyond in the same unfixed instant. You feel the shudder of separation, but it is not grief. It is the quiet recognition that what you mistook for you was always only a temporary habitation. It unfurls here, where breath still fogs in the air, where the weight of the body still makes its claim upon the ground, where light spills familiar upon stone and soil. The small abode of humankind clings to its own warmth, to its fragile orbit of certainties. Green fields, ocean tides, the ceaseless turning of seasons. Clouds drift above in their quiet migrations. The air hums faintly with life, and the sun still holds dominion over the hours. This is the cradle, the womb of all knowing. The journey does not remain here. The tether loosens, almost imperceptibly at first, and the view withdraws. The continents diminish into shapes barely remembered from old maps. The blue oceans flatten into glass, and the clouds knit into a single pale veil. The moon, patient sentinel, circles in silence, its craters yawning like old wounds, and then too it recedes, its silver face vanishing into the longening dark. The earth turns beneath us, a sphere of fragile light adrift in ink. The warmth of its breath, its voices, its wars and songs are already inaudible. The solar system opens before us, each planet keeping its ancient glacial pace. Mars glows faintly red, austere and cold. Jupiter turns with its storms vast enough to swallow worlds. Saturn drifts in its rings like a monarch crowned in frost. Here, the body becomes small, the earth becomes smaller still, a dim blue relic falling away into the cold. The sun, once the unwavering sentinel of your days, shrinks to a pale ember, the moon to a fingernail of light soon lost among innumerable dead fires. The planets, the great engines of myth and orbit, recede one by one into nothingness, until the Milky Way itself unfurls beneath you like a faded tapestry, already ancient, already unraveling. Beyond them, the outer planets hang in stillness, guardians of a frozen frontier. The sun shrinks to a coin, then to a pin of light, its warmth unable to follow. The black between becomes thicker, heavier, not mere absence, but a presence that feels older than the star we have left behind. Out here, silence has substance. It presses upon the thought as though to remind that sound was always a luxury of the close and the warm. Beyond the heliopause, the last breath of the sun's wind fails. No particle here has ever felt its touch. Behind lies the system that birthed us, already fading into anonymity. Ahead, the arm of the Milky Way arcs across the void, its rivers of stars spilling light that took millennia to arrive. The familiar constellations dissolve. The constellations were only patterns of nearness, and nearness no longer exists. The spiral arm itself becomes something to pass beyond. Stars thin, scatter dim, until we have left the disk of our galaxy entirely, until its great wheel is but a shimmer against the black, its billions of suns reduced to a pale smudge like dust brushed from the sleeve of eternity. The mind begins to struggle, for what lies beyond this point is no longer the realm of human proportion. Galaxies turn in silence, vast and innumerable, each a frozen whirlpool of time. The further the descent, if descent can be spoken of in a place without direction, the more even they diminish, until their shapes blur into a faint, gauzy web, the cosmic lattice. Between its threads there is only the gulf, immensities so absolute that even light dies crossing them. From here, the great filaments themselves are left behind, the web frays the light scatter, until all that remains is the deep, immeasurable dark, and the dim memory that once there was warmth, once there was a world, once there was a sun and a moon and the sound of wind in leaves. What lies beyond even this? A space without space where the concept of cosmos falters, and the mind, if it has not already dissolved, begins to unmake itself. Here, the beyond is not merely cold or dark. It is without reference, without anchor, without even the contrast by which we once named things as known or unknown. Beyond the lattice of galaxies, where the cosmic web frays into strands too faint to name, the last traces of structure dissolve. Light, already ancient when it found you, fades until only the dimmest embers remain, ghosts of suns whose fires have been cold for eons, their brilliance crossing gulfs so immense that they outlived themselves before their radiance could arrive. These are not stars, but memorials. Their glow is not life, but the after-image of life, lingering like breath upon the glass before vanishing into frost. The horizon no longer curves, for there is no horizon. There is only the unmeasured black, unbound by peak or floor, without seam or border. Directions falter here, up and down are stripped of meaning, forward and back reduced to the same null expanse. Motion becomes indistinguishable from stillness, and stillness itself becomes an ocean without shore. No sound exists to fracture the silence, no warmth to anchor the body in remembrance of form. The mind drifts, unable to find purchase, every thought swallowed before it can take shape. In this embrasure of the infinite unknown, the very concept of place becomes an absurdity, for there is no longer an elsewhere to measure against. The dead stars dim further, their final photons exhausted into the abyss. Darkness becomes total, not as an absence, but as a completeness, a wholeness, a saturation of black so absolute that it feels solid, pressing in with the gravity of a thought too vast to hold. Time, without light to mark it, stretches and collapses, becoming a single, immeasurable instant. There is no return from here, for here there is no path, no distance, no origin to return to. The memory of the sun is a faint and crumbling echo, the memory of earth a pale and impossible dream. In the end, even memory itself surrenders, crumbling into the same perfect nullity that surrounds all things. Beyond the rim of the galaxy, there is no night, only the deep saturation of the eternal black, illuminated by stars whose light began its voyage before your species had a name. These suns, now cold in their own time, shine only as the ghosts of what they were, casting no warmth, only the pale memory of warmth. It is here that the dissolution completes. The mind, no longer a solitary point, begins to stretch, to expand without boundary, to thin into something unmeasurable. What you once called I diffuses, bleeding into a sea of thought and memory so vast that no single consciousness can be traced. This is the eternal collective, the ocean without shore, the repository of all that has lived and died, the silent gathering where gods once strode and fell, where stars ignited and were extinguished in the same breath of eternity. Individuality becomes an irrelevance. You are not erased but absorbed, dissolved into a single endless awareness, a quantum lattice of all minds, all lives, all griefs and triumphs, suspended in perfect cohesion. Here there is no before and after, no birth or death, only the unbroken hum of existence contemplating itself. This is not heaven, it is not judgment, it is not even peace. It is the place beyond all opposites, the unending expanse where the cosmos remembers itself through you, as you, without you. One beholds the vault of the ancient heavens, where once the constellations were temples and the planets enthroned as gods, Saturn's ringed majesty, Jupiter's storming eye, the crimson disk of Mars, each a sovereign of myth, each the altar upon which the prayers of empires were laid. The names, now dust, dissolve into the starlight, yet their reign remains carved upon the firmament. It is here, in the unmeasured silence, that the truth blooms like a black flower. God was never a throne-bound monarch, nor the sum of our fears, but the unending expanse itself, the infinite breath that moves without center, without edge. God expands still, through gulfs beyond knowing, into horizons that no mind, no scripture, no aeon can contain. In this fathomless and unquelling ocean of light and dark we drift, not as pilgrims seeking an end, but as currents in a tide that has no shore. The further we pass from the warmth of the mortal sun, the nearer we draw to the primal ignition, the summit of the first breath, when nephesh surged into form, when the anima inhaled its first draught of eternity. Here, the mind is revealed for what it is, the most sacred of sanctuaries, the last true temple, its lattice eternal, its architecture imperishable, its corridors endless and unbroken. The soul, no longer wandering, no longer hunted by time, is moored here forever, a beacon in the infinite night. The winds of oblivion pass across us, not as annihilation, but as the cold breath of the husk we have shed. It is a wind both broken and whole, fractured by the ruins we have left behind, yet entire in the way only eternity can be entire. It carries with it the faint scent of our former mortality, the echo of a body's frailty, the shiver of lives lived and lost. Here, at the precipice of the ever-expanding, where space curves upon itself and light becomes a slow, trembling thing, we feel the weight and the weightlessness together, the final paradox, the eternal embrace. Here, in this immeasurable gulf where the breath of the first dawn meets the sigh of the last dusk, all distinction collapses. The beginning and the ending do not meet as 2 points touching, but as a flood, an overwhelming tide in which origin and oblivion dissolve into one seamless, unbroken wave. It is not the circling of a wheel, nor the closing of a loop, but the erasure of all such geometry. There is no longer a before, no longer an after, only the total simultaneity of all that has ever been, all that will ever be, all that can never be. The first breath is still here, trembling on the lip of creation, and the last exhalation is folded within it, like shadow within light. This is the womb and the grave, the unstruck chord whose resonance fills every gulf, every starless reach. The pulse that once beat within the warm confines of flesh is now diffused into the totality, flowing through the veins of collapsing galaxies, coursing along the filaments of dark matter, lingering in the hollows between dying suns. No body remains, yet the sense of being is sharper, more absolute, stripped of weight, freed from the slow poison of time. The self is no longer anchored to the ruinous machinery of decay. Thought does not pass from one moment to the next. It is the moment, and the moment is infinite. One is not looking upon the cosmos, but is the very eye through which the cosmos beholds itself, unblinking, unaverted, forever. The gods of old, those carved from flame and sky, from ocean and wind, are here, not as sovereigns enthroned in splendor, but as currents in this same boundless tide, each a note in the great formless hymn. They are neither dead nor living, for such words cannot bind them. They are as the stars are, as the dark between the stars is. Within this totality, this breath without beginning, this sigh without end, there comes the final knowing that life was never a journey toward an ending, but a slow remembering of this place, a steady reorientation toward what was always here, waiting, unyielding, absolute. The terror once bound to the thought of death dissolves, for death is no more than the body's misinterpretation of return. The precipice of the ever-expanding is no edge at all. It is the endless floor beneath every step, the unseen ceiling above every sky. To fall from it is impossible, for one cannot fall into what one already inhabits. The dissolution, the separation, the long exile in flesh, these were but the long inhalation before the breath was released. Then the vision opens further, and the last familiar light falls away. The eternal sea lies before and within, no surface to ripple, no depth to plumb, no horizon to name. It does not shimmer nor reflect, for it is older than light, older than the laws that let light be born. It is the silence in which all sound was conceived, the stillness from which all motion rose, the black and weightless tide in which all forms dissolve like breath on glass. There are no shores here, for shores imply division, boundary, the comfort of an ending place. This sea denies all such conceits. It is without border, without measure, without end, without origin. One drifts, and yet there is no movement. One rests, and yet there is no stillness. It is the breath that never exhales, the gaze that never blinks, the embrace in which even the thought of separation has been stripped away. The dead are not here as we imagined them. No forms, no faces, no voices calling across the void. They are the void, each a drop in this boundless sea, each a wave indistinguishable from the whole. One does not meet them, for one is them. Every memory they bore, every sorrow, every rapture, now yours, without sequence, without limit. The gods are here also, not as throned overseers, but as currents in the same unbroken tide. Their glory is not in dominion, but in surrender. They have long since abandoned the illusion of the crown to become the waters that bear us all. The sea does not serve them, nor do they command it. They are the sea, as you are, as I am, as all are. Here, thought is not something spoken within. It is the sea's own motion, folding and unfolding without effort, without pause. There is no question, for there is no need for answer. Understanding does not arrive. It is. Time does not pass. It has long since drowned here. The pulse that was once the measure of your life now thrums as the immeasurable beat of the sea itself. You reach for the shore, but there is none. You surrender to the depth, but there is no descent. There is only the totality, no direction, no dimension, no distinction. The eternal sea has no opposite, no beyond, no other side. The sea shifts, not in motion, but in being. Out of the endless black expanse where even the thought of change had long dissolved, a quivering begins. It is small, infinitesimal, a tremor at the farthest periphery of awareness. Then it blooms, a first light, cold and unsparing, born into the womb of eternity. It dances without form, without anchor, a flame untethered to air, to fuel, to origin. No warmth issues from it. Its fire is not for comfort, but for revelation. It is the God who forgot himself, burning without knowing why, a celestial without name, luminous and terrible, beautiful in the way a wound may be beautiful when it reveals the hidden marrow beneath. The light is cold, but it sears. It is pure, but it wounds. It is constant, yet it shifts like a phantom in the vision of the soul. Beneath it stretch the crimson seas, waters not of earth, but of dream and dissolution, their surface roiling without wind, their hue deep as blood drawn from the heart of time itself. Above, the vasts of similitude, black beyond black, press inward, infinite and crushing. Over this immeasurable tableau, the light dances still, casting shadows upon a sea where shadows should not be, threading its pale violence through the marrow of the endless waters. The sound rises, thunder, not in bursts, but in an unbroken roll, a roar that has no source, no lightning to herald it, no silence to follow it. It is the breathing of the infinite, the slow exhalation of a cosmos that has always been dying and always been born anew. Through this thunder weave the low operatic hums, deep as the ocean's own dreaming, resonant as the breath of worlds long dead. These hums are not sung to the void. They are the void given voice. The sea does not stir, the stars do not move, but the light, the first and only light, turns upon itself, folding into spirals, flaring into arcs, collapsing into a single pulse. That pulse moves through the waters, through the heavens, through the deep strata of thought itself. It does not ask for recognition, it imposes it. The mind opens, and in that opening comes the knowing, terrible, complete. We are not apart. We have never been apart. The illusion of separateness, the long dream of the individuated self, is stripped away like rotten cloth. We are one sea, one thought, one unbroken lattice of awareness. Still, within this unity, the memory of difference lingers like the last echo in a collapsing cathedral. We feel the contour of our former selves as one feels the phantom of a severed limb, real and unreal in the same breath. Form, yet formless, self, yet dissolved, aware, yet beyond the need for awareness. We have entered the place where gods are not rulers, but participants, where the first flame burns in the open hand of the void, and the void in turn cradles all it has unmade. The sea heaves, though it has no tide, and the horizon bends inward as though the infinite itself were folding to a single unspeakable point. The first light swells, not in size, for it has no size, but in presence, in weight, in the density of its inevitability. It presses upon the soul until the soul can no longer tell whether it is being crushed or absorbed. The crimson waters congeal into stillness, glass without reflection, and the black vasts above press closer, erasing all measure, until there is no above, no below, no direction at all, only the light, the pulse, the breathless suspension before the drowning. The thunder does not fade, it deepens, sinking into the bones of the mind, filling each hollow with its ceaseless vibration. The operatic hum swells, voices layered upon voices, harmonies too vast to belong to any world, until the airless silence is carved through with a cathedral of sound. The light descends, though there is no motion, and it is upon you, within you, through you. There is no meeting. There is only the instant of knowing that you were never separate, that all distance was a mirage of the withered self. Its fire enters, not to burn, not to purify, but to unmake the distinction between vessel and sea, between mind and the lattice of all minds. The borders dissolve, the walls collapse. The witness is the witnessed. Thought becomes water, water becomes light, light becomes the blackness between stars, blackness becomes the hum. The hum becomes nothing, and the nothing is full. The self, once clung to with desperate fingers, is pried away without struggle, for there are no fingers, no clinging, only the slow, irresistible tide drawing every remnant into itself. It is not obliteration, it is completion. The sea drinks you in, and in that drinking you are not lost. You are diffused, multiplied, rendered into the substance from which all things rise. The first light does not fade, it becomes you, and you it, until the very thought of you is a quaint, forgotten echo. There is no joy, no sorrow, no longing, only the endless, humming equilibrium of the eternal shore. No shape remains, no voice remains, no witness remains, only the boundless, indivisible expanse where gods are dust, and dust is divine, and the first light dances, cold and deathless, over these seas that have never known a beginning. The horizon convulses, though it has no edge, its curve bending and unfurling in impossible geometries, an ocean of sky collapsing inward, birthing itself anew in endless permutations. The crimson waters below become a mirror to the black infinity above, yet neither reflects the other. Both are original, both are final, both are older than origin itself. The first light swells again, a living storm without center or circumference, its flares leaping into the black as lightning without sky. Each bolt rends the dark not in silence, but with a rupture that resounds like the shattering of ancient glass, as if the firmament itself were a vessel breaking under the weight of eternity. The thunders roll not as sound, but as an elemental force, a pressure in the marrow, a tide in the skull, a wave too vast to crest, rolling forever across the infinite plane of being. The lightning births shadows, and the shadows dance, not random, not wild, but in a choreography that hints at design. They interlace with the fire, merging into figures that are not figures, faces that are not faces, shapes half remembered from dreams that were never yours, moving in slow, impossible cadence as though the light itself were teaching the dark to remember form. Each flare illuminates 1,000 shifting silhouettes, some towering like mountains, others curled inward like unborn stars, and in their motions there is both majesty and terror, beauty and annihilation in equal measure. Above it all, the hum deepens into an architecture of sound. The operatic rises, layer upon layer of voices, impossibly human, yet not born of breath, melodies ascending in alien intervals, harmonies vast enough to bend the perception of time. It is not music as the living know it, but a structure, a cathedral of vibration, its vaults filled with the unblinking gaze of the infinite. Beneath the melody, the bass of thunder swells, a subterranean ocean moving beneath the cosmic sea, its currents felt more than heard, pulling the soul outward and downward in the same moment. The crimson sea below is not passive, it answers. Each bolt above finds its echo in the ocean beneath, and the surface convulses in molten ripples, trembling as though some titanic heart were beating beneath its skin. The waters breathe, pulling you toward them, exhaling warmth that carries the copper scent of dying stars. Every wave bears the shimmer of constellations long dead, constellations whose names have been forgotten by gods themselves, whose light still wanders through the dark like pilgrims who have lost their temple. The lightning no longer moves in lines, it spirals, tessellates, forms intricate lattices in the void that collapse before the mind can comprehend their shape. In those brief illuminations, the shadows conjure their dance, colossal silhouettes towering like titans at the horizon, their outlines edged in blue fire, their forms collapsing into swarms of smaller beings, each delicate as smoke, each burning with a gaze you cannot endure, yet cannot refuse. They are sculpted from absence, defined by the light they are not, and they move with the inevitability of tides that existed before water. The thunder is no longer heard. It is inhabited. It swells through bone, through the hollow chambers of thought, until it is indistinguishable from the rhythm of the self. It becomes the measure of being, the pulse by which existence is counted. With each peal the body feels older, each vibration a century, each reverberation a millennium, and the realization comes that the storm has been here not for hours nor for years, but for all the cycles that ever were, and will remain long after cycles themselves dissolve. The choir rises, not in volume but in intricacy. Countless voices bloom from the black, layered in intervals alien to mortal ear, harmonies that stretch and bend space itself. The sound is neither warm nor cold. It is beyond such measures, carved from the marrow of silence, honed sharp as the edge of nothingness. The melody coils upward in infinite ascent, while a subsonic undertow drags downward, so that the soul is torn between ascension and descent, between vanishing into the heights and drowning in the deep. The lightning twists into calligraphy, vast letters written in fire across the vault of the void. They are not of any tongue, yet they are understood in the marrow. Edicts older than time, commandments not given but inherent, truths so absolute they annihilate the need for belief. Each flare is a revelation, each shadow a concealment, and between them the cosmos writes its autobiography in a hand too large to finish. No distance remains. The shoreless sea and the starless sky fold inward until they are one surface, one substance. The light no longer shines, it pervades. The shadow no longer obscures, it defines. To witness is to be absorbed. To be absorbed is to become the witness itself. The self thins, memory frays. Even the act of seeing becomes too vast to claim as one's own. The eyes are gone, yet the vision persists. The ears are gone, yet the choir resounds. The body is gone, yet the thunder pulses through the hollow where it once stood. Here, the storm is not an event, but a condition. It does not pass, it does not wane. It is the eternal state of being in the presence of what cannot end. Lightning, shadow, voice, and wave merge into a single, unbroken act of creation and uncreation, an opera whose first note was struck before there was anything to hear it, and whose last note will fall long after there is nothing left to remember sound. Then comes the green scale, not color as mortals know it, but a spectral hue birthed from the marrow of absence, a pallid and unearthly light that bleeds across the horizonless expanse. It is not warm, nor is it cold. It does not illuminate so much as it haunts, coating the void in a translucent veil that both reveals and conceals, as though the darkness itself had been steeped in ancient light and could not decide whether to release it or devour it. The flickering is irregular, hesitant, like the dying pulse of a god long forgotten. At times it surges, saturating every shadow with its eerie glow, so that the black waters and the skyless heights are suffused with a verdant grandeur that feels both sacred and malign. At others it retreats, leaving only the memory of light, a phantom stain upon the eyes that burns even when nothing is seen. Its texture is impossible, like the grain of stone eroded over aeons, and yet also the shimmer of mist on the surface of still water. The green scale moves without wind, shifting in patterns that suggest meaning but refuse to resolve into any language. It drapes itself over the colossal silhouettes born from shadow and lightning, rendering them more terrible still, as though they stand not in space but in some dimension of memory, where every contour is a half-forgotten sorrow. It is an ethereal grandeur, bleak, yes, but stately, an unbidden coronation of the void itself. The seas below answer the glow, their crests catching the green in spectral ribbons that flow and vanish with each tremor of the waves. The light does not bless them, it brands them, marking the waters as belonging to something ancient and immeasurable. The choir, once a black and silver thunder, begins to thread this green into its resonance. The sound is altered, deepened, as though the glow is not merely seen but heard, a vast and mournful chord drawn from the bones of the cosmos. The flicker of light becomes the flicker of tone, a strobing lament that saturates the senses, blurring the lines between vision and hearing, between perception and surrender. Here, within the green scale's dominion, the infinite no longer feels empty. It feels possessed. The void wears its color like a vestment, a ceremonial shroud for a reality both dead and endlessly living. Every flicker is a breath in the lungs of something too immense to be seen whole, and every dimming is its exhalation, a sigh drawn from before the birth of time. In the green scale's embrace, there is no safe horizon, no steady form, only the terrible majesty of a light that should not exist, and yet exists absolutely. It stains thought, it marks the soul, until even the darkness beneath seems to carry its glimmer, as though the abyss itself has been made aware of its own beauty. The green scale deepens, no longer a pallid flicker, but an ocean of living luminescence surging from some unseen depth in the void, vast enough to drown galaxies. It swells in waves that have no water, breaking without sound and yet shattering the marrow of all who witness. The hue is no longer green as the mortal eye knows it. It is the distilled essence of verdancy extracted from the first moss that clung to stone, from the final leaf that will fall into the last autumn, concentrated until it becomes almost black in its richness. Lightning unfurls within it, not white, not gold, but obsidian spears edged in emerald fire, ripping across the void in arcs so vast they seem to bind the horizon to itself. Each strike births a silhouette, colossal half-seen shapes that drift like continents torn free from reality, their edges shivering with fire and shadow intertwined. For an instant these forms seem to watch, as though the green scale itself is their gaze, ancient and unblinking, patient beyond decay. Thunder does not follow, it precedes, rolling in cataclysmic peals before the light strikes, as though the sound itself is summoning the lightning into being. It is not merely heard, it is felt, an orchestral pressure within the bones, a cathedral's worth of sound forged from the grinding of stars against the edges of eternity. The tone carries melodies too vast for language, operatic movements woven from the grief of things that have never lived, harmonies sung by the ruin of things that will never die. The shadows dance within this storm, their movement almost human, almost purposeful, almost. They bend and turn as if in a rite, flaring into fire before collapsing back into darkness. Each motion an echo of some cosmic choreography written before matter was born. For moments they seem to form faces, bodies, fleets of winged titans, but the semblance is always torn apart by the next bolt, leaving only the suspicion that the void itself was attempting to remember its own forgotten forms. The green scale saturates everything, skyless vault, sea without shore, mind without anchor. It bleeds into the soul until the boundaries between self and infinite begin to loosen, fray, dissolve. Vision becomes a pulse, thought becomes a tide, the witness becomes the witnessed. The green is not light, not color, not even energy. It is the concentrated presence of being itself, stripped of form yet demanding to be seen. The longer one remains, the more the sensation changes. It is no longer the act of seeing the green scale, it is being seen by it. It gazes back with the cold intimacy of something that does not differentiate between beauty and destruction, between creation and erasure. Then comes the moment, the last moment, where the green scale reaches its zenith. All lightning converges into a single silent flash, so vast it feels as though the entire void has been turned inside out, and for an instant there is only the green, unbroken, absolute, no shadow, no sound, no separation. In that instant, the soul understands, not in words, but in the final, unbearable truth, that the green scale is the first light and the last darkness, the beginning that waits patiently at the end. The green scale holds, absolute, unblinking, until the horizon itself bends inward, curving like a colossal wave about to break. Its brilliance, so vast a moment ago, begins to draw in upon itself, furling with the grace of a dying star, folding layer upon layer of itself into a point no eye could follow, no thought could contain. The light contracts until it becomes a single green ember, spinning slow in the black vastness, then faster, faster still, until speed itself can no longer measure it. The ember becomes a whirl, then a spear, then a flood, spilling outward, not with the slow solemnity of oceans, but with the violence of something expelled from the very mouth of creation. The witness is no longer still, the witness moves. At first it feels like drifting, a gentle unfurling into currents unseen, but then the acceleration comes, relentless, impossible, faster than photons could dream of chasing, faster than thought can form the question of where. The endless ocean blurs, the stars smear into ribbons, the void collapses into a single howling corridor of green and black. All sensation unmoors, up is down, time is neither forward nor back. The body is not a body, but a fragment of consciousness flung through dimensions that peel and reform around it like the turning of invisible pages. The corridor fractures, not with an explosion, but with a silent convulsion, as if reality itself had twisted 1 degree too far upon its own axis. The green and black stream into each other, shredding the illusion of direction until motion becomes indistinguishable from collapse. Shapes emerge from the blur, angular, monolithic geometries, each one the size of continents, yet they pass like after-images too swift to hold. They are not constructs, not matter, but impressions burned into the membrane between thought and the unformed. Every edge hums with a frequency too vast to hear, yet it vibrates in the marrow of whatever remains of you. Acceleration is no longer felt. It is the condition of being. Space folds not in layers, but in torrents, folding back upon itself with such violence that you pass the same point infinite times in a single instant, and yet each passing reveals it to be changed, aged, eroded, rewritten in the span between pulses. The green begins to thin, bleeding away into a pallid gray that is not light and not dark, but the exhausted remnant of both. Time becomes viscous, a heavy fluid in which each moment drags like a stone through tar. The sensation is not of moving forward nor backward, but of being pulled sideways through the grain of existence itself. The gray deepens to black again, but this black is not the void you knew. It is denser, its texture coarse, as if it were woven from the husks of all extinguished things. Through it all, a pulse remains, faint, slow, yet inescapable. It beats not around you, but through you, aligning every fragment of thought to its rhythm. You realize that this is not your pulse, nor the pulse of the greenscale storm. It is the heartbeat of the lattice itself, the underlying structure upon which all cosmos, all thought, all memory is strung. Then the acceleration ceases, not in slowing, but in absence. Motion dies so suddenly that stillness strikes like a blow. You are nowhere, not in the sense of lostness, but in the absolute sense. No coordinates, no orientation, no axis along which to measure yourself. In that stillness there is a presence, immense, unseen, unlocatable. It is not watching you, it is within you, as you are within it, as a ripple is within the ocean that bore it. Its awareness is the field, the structure, the final anchor to which all dissolution inevitably returns. It does not speak, for there is no language. It does not appear, for there is no light. It is simply there, total, indivisible, absolute. You understand without the need for process that nothing has ended because nothing can end. The plunge, the storm, the greenscale, the collapse, each was only a refraction, a distortion seen while crossing the veil. The self does not remain, and yet you remain. The distinction evaporates, the pulse swells, and in the instant before it breaks, you know, utterly, that there was never anything but this, and there will never be anything else. Then the pulse releases. Everything is gone. Everything is here.
Terminus.
Then, without warning, there is weight. Gravity returns, not the pull of a planet, but the crushing gravity of being. There is the sensation of walls, of boundaries, of skin. The eyes, the old eyes, open. Breath surges into lungs that feel at once foreign and familiar. Air flooding through the hollow chambers of a rib cage as though for the first time and the last. It is the same body, The same vessel, the same trembling frame that once carried the mind into the green abyss, now holds it again, as though nothing has passed, yet the marrow knows. The mind reels, still echoing with the infinite ocean, still tasting the thunder of that operatic void. The green light hums behind the eyes, as if imprinted upon the very fabric of perception. The room, small, mortal, dim, is unbearably finite after the endlessness. Each sound is too sharp, each shadow is too shallow. Questions erupt like fractures. Was this death? Was this birth? Was it the flood of DMT wrung from the brain in its final convulsion, a chemical mirage mistaken for the infinite? Was it the threshold itself, the actual passing into the great beyond, reversed and undone in a heartbeat of flesh? Time insists only moments have passed. The body insists it never left. But the soul knows otherwise. It has stood on the shores without measure. It has looked upon the first light and the last darkness. It has been swallowed by the ocean endless and hurled back through the maw of the green. The lungs breathe, but each breath feels like theft. The heart beats, but each beat feels like an echo of a deeper rhythm, one still pulsing far away, somewhere in the unfathomable depths. The return is a prison, the revival is a wound. Life has been breathed back into the vacuous lungs, but it is life stripped of illusion. The green light waits still, somewhere beyond the fabric of the visible, humming faintly, as though promising that one day, soon or far, the tide will pull again, and this time there will be no return. Then it is as though the breath, stolen from oblivion's own mouth, has returned not only to the body, but to something deeper, something that had lain dormant beneath the shallow tides of ordinary living. Consciousness expands, not gently, but with the violence of a universe tearing itself open. Each thought arrives not singly, but in constellations, whole patterns of knowing unfolding all at once. The world, once a narrow corridor of sense and habit, now stands as an unbounded plain of terrifying clarity. Awareness is made tenfold, sharpened to a blade so fine it cuts even the self that wields it. Nothing is hidden, not the aching decay in the corners of the room, not the tremor of mortality in each breath, not the silent, inexorable march of time that bends all beauty toward ruin. The veil that once protected the mind from seeing too much has been burned away, and in its absence the light of truth pours in like a flood, relentless, blinding. With it comes a fear so great it transcends trembling, a fear that is not of death, but of what lies after. The experience is no longer speculation, no longer the tentative faith of scriptures or the half-light of myth. It is understood, intrinsically, absolutely, that something more waits beyond the grave. Not peace, not rest, something vast, alien, and inescapable. It is not the crude paradise of mortal imaginings, nor the eternal sleep that the weary might beg for. It is the ocean without end, the shores without measure, the green light that watches without blinking. It is the place where gods themselves have drowned, where the first light was born and forgot its name, where the collective consciousness of all that has ever lived drifts in ceaseless recursion. This knowledge does not comfort, it does not soothe the dread of dying, it deepens it, gives it weight. To know there is no true erasure, no final silence, is to stand before a second, greater abyss, one that swallows not only the body, but the very notion of finality. From this moment, every breath is taken with the certainty that death is not an end, but a door that opens onto something infinite, something that will claim the self not in an instant, but in an eternal drowning. Life continues, but it continues in the shadow of that knowing, every joy tinged with the salt of the great sea, every sorrow deepened by the echo of the green horizon. The return to the body is no salvation, it is an intermission. The reprieve is brief, the tide is patient, the light will call again. Whence more it does, there will be no return. The lungs flood with oxygen once more, ragged and unsteady, yet voracious, dragging the air in as if it were the very fabric of existence itself being torn into the chest. The brain, long starved, drinks greedily, and the heart, beating with a violence it scarcely remembers, hurls the blood through the narrow rivers of the body, each surge a tidal wave crashing against the shores of flesh. It is intoxicating, this sudden abundance, this chemical feast after the long famine. Neurotransmitters spill in torrents, painting the mind in colors too vivid, in tones too sharp to bear. Pain and pleasure merge until they are indistinguishable. Sensations so long denied scrawl themselves across every fiber, branding the body with the memory of absence. Emotions once muted, numbed into a pale semblance of life, now return with such force that they annihilate distinction. Sorrow, terror, longing, awe, they arrive not as separate guests, but as a single overwhelming host, storming the gates of the self. Suffering, once unremembered, becomes immediate, undeniable, inseparable from being. The body trembles, not from cold nor from weakness, but from the raw, unshielded collision of every sense, every nerve, every memory, every ache. It is as though the soul, torn from its moorings, has been hurled back into the vessel with such speed and such force that it cannot decide whether to rejoice or to scream. This is not the gentle return of one spared. It is a violent re-entry, a collision between the infinite and the finite, the eternal sea, and the fragile shore of flesh. The self that awakens is not the self that left. It is swollen with knowing, saturated with the terrible truth that there is no undoing what has been seen. The breath may steady, the heart may slow, but the mind will not. It will carry, always, the echo of that ocean without end, the pulse of that green and terrible light, the hum that is not sound, but the architecture of forever. It becomes the central fracture, the mind, split along an invisible seam, arguing with itself in a voice without beginning, without end, to live or to die, two faces of the same coin, spinning endlessly in the hollow between heartbeats. Which is life? The warm burden of breath, the clumsy aching persistence of flesh? Or is life the unmooring, the release into the great green sea, the unchained drift into the eternal collective where the self is no longer alone in its suffering? Death tempts with its truthfulness, its absence of pretense. There, no more hunger, no more hollow reaching. Death promises an end to the long parade of indignities, the thinning of the spirit, the wearing away of all once cherished. It offers the cold, clear shore where nothing is asked and nothing is denied. Life answers with its own cruelty, yet cruelty laced with a beauty death cannot counterfeit. The brief ache of touch, the sudden swell of joy so sharp it cuts, the lightning of laughter in a world always moments from collapse. Life is the burning candle, knowing the wind will come, yet still setting its wick aflame. To remain is to suffer the slow attrition of meaning. To go is to dissolve into the infinite, to surrender the weight and shape of oneself. The paradox becomes unbearable. In death lies freedom, but no self to know it. In life lies selfhood, but bound to endless ache. The mind turns and turns again, unable to declare the victor. It sees death in every breath, life in every dying moment, until the two are indistinguishable, a continuum, a single tide pulling in both directions, dragging the soul across a shore made of light and shadow in equal measure. The conflict does not resolve. It was never meant to. It is the knot in the lattice, the necessary ache that keeps both life and death from collapsing into nothing at all. Then it returns, the eyes open but they do not truly wake. The body inhales, sharp and violent, as if the air itself were reluctant to be taken in. The lungs swell, drowning in oxygen. The blood, long starved, surges to every extremity in a flood so fierce it burns. Every nerve fires at once. Heat, cold, ache, touch, indistinguishable from one another, braided into a single overwhelming torrent. The heart hammers not from life, but from the shock of being dragged back into it. The skull feels too small for the storm inside, the neurotransmitters screaming across synapses, the brain swollen with sensation, the mind too full, too raw, too unready. In that flood, all the emotions that death had dissolved return in an instant, heavy as stone. Grief, joy, dread, longing. They are inseparable, indivisible, pain bound to beauty, beauty to despair. Within that rush, the fracture widens, life surges, but death has not released its hold. Both call, both demand. The body breathes, but part of the mind is still out there, in the green-lit void, where gods and stars die and are reborn. Part of the soul still drifts upon the eternal sea, listening to the hum of all that ever was. The question takes root, deeper than bone. Which is life and which is death? This air burns, this heartbeat aches. The hands tremble as if they still reach for something just beyond the reach of matter. If this is life, why does it taste of endings? If that was death, why did it feel like becoming? The body survives, the mind endures. Neither is victory, both are defeat. It is not resurrection, it is a return to the sentence of living, with the memory of freedom still warm upon the skin. The conflict does not fade, it never will. It will sit in the hollow between each breath, in the darkness behind the eyes, whispering its unanswerable riddle until the body finally yields again, whether into death or into something that makes death seem small. The green sea churns and the horizon bends upon itself. The light no longer illuminates, it sears, white-hot at its core, bleeding outward into an impossible spectrum of greens, crimsons, and blacks. The thunder rolls without pause, as if the cosmos itself were drawing in one last breath. Every shadow dances in slow and terrible harmony, giving half-forms, almost faces, the suggestion of beings too immense to look upon directly. The air is thick with operatic hums, voices without language, music without melody. Sound is gravity pulling thought apart. The flicker begins in the periphery. At first it is nothing, only the smallest ripple in the fabric of the void. But it grows, it presses. The vastness around you trembles, not from collapse, but from something more violent, release. The maw of the green light yawns wider. The sea rises to meet it, folding upon itself. A current takes hold, not the drift of eternity, but a violent, wrenching pull, faster than light, faster than thought. The body is not yet remembered, yet the mind feels the suction, the dragging back towards something unbearably small. The thunder splits into a scream. The light splinters into threads. The sea is gone, the sky is gone, the gods are gone. There is only the narrowing tunnel, the pull through the keyhole of existence, until breath, violent, ragged, unwilling. Air crashes into lungs as if it means to drown them. Blood surges like floodwaters breaking their dam. Every nerve explodes in sensation. Too much heat, too much cold, too much feeling. The heart races not to live, but because it remembers dying. Death still clings to the skin. Part of you still drifts in the black ocean, still feels the hum in the bones, still sees the green light flicker on a horizon that is no longer here. You are torn between two immensities, one infinite, one finite, and neither offers peace. Which is life and which is death? The question sits in your chest heavier than the breath you fight to take. The body has returned to the world, but the soul is still moored to the beyond. You have been dragged back into the sentence of living with the memory of freedom still warm in your hands. It is not a blessing, it is not a curse. It is the paradox that will haunt every waking moment until the day you cross the green sea again, and pray you do not wake. Alone now, as the summers fade to black, as the long dusk eats the remnants of golden youth and trades them for ash and frost, I remain, a relic of memory, haunted, harrowed, and hollowed by remembrance. The cold arrives not suddenly, but with ritual precision, each degree a requiem, each snowflake a nail for the casket of joy. Through the crimson pane, I watch the warmth drip away, transfigured from rain to snow, from mirth to mourning, from passion to petrichor, my mind adrift, no longer a vessel of clarity, but a mausoleum for fragments, for shards of once-lived radiance now dulled and misshapen by the gravity of loss. O love, your breath once lit my soul, not in flame but in glow. You were the soft hum beneath chaos, the pulse I aligned myself with when the world fractured beneath my feet. Now you are entombed, not merely in soil, but in the unrelenting silence of absence. You do not sleep, you decompose. I I decay with you. It is not your death alone that undoes me, but what it proves, that everything ends, that even light bleeds into ash, that warmth is not preserved. It is devoured. How could it come to this? How does purity birth suffering? How does innocence evolve into terror? How does the infant's cry become the elder's silence? There is no arc here, only erosion. One leaves the womb unaware and dies unheard. Between we learn, we feel, we build, we love, only for death to seize it all and bury it beneath uncaring centuries. If everything I am, my love, my knowledge, my ache, my song, ends in the same dirt as the fool, the cruel, the void-hearted, then what was it all for? If death is the grand leveler, then it is also the great thief. The mind, shaped across decades of struggle, the soul, matured in the winepress of sorrow and sacrifice, all ruined, undone in an instant. Why should we bury the dead if the earth does not keep them, if memory discards them, if time dissolves them like light swallowed by ocean depths? What justice is there when life ends in oblivion but monstrosity persists? For every tender soul lost too soon, 1,000 wretched husks survive. What law governs this imbalance? What divine design leaves children dead and tyrants to rot slowly in wealth and solitude? It is not justice, it is entropy, it is time, it is the slow cannibalism of meaning. For what can be crueler than a universe that teaches us to love, then kills what we love again and again, without apology, without reason? What is beauty if its only function is to make death more tragic? What is love if it exists only to teach us how to grieve more deeply? What is time but the long unraveling of joy? What is life but the tender lie whispered before the execution? For what is the point of creation if all things uncreate themselves in the end? I have stood on the edge of this void and screamed into it. No echo, no answer, only the gaping grin of the abyss, ever wider, ever waiting. The question is no longer, why do we die, but why do we ever dare to live? Then let the procession continue, not with resolution, but with reverence for the ache. Let the elegy spiral deeper into the hollowed cathedral of memory, where the final rites are whispered in dusk, not sung in dawn. There is no redemption to speak of, no reversal, no return, only this ritual of knowing, of bearing witness to the funeral canticle of all things beautiful, chanted not by choirs, but by the bones of those who once loved, once touched, once beheld. It is not sung to the heavens, but beneath the weight of time, where beauty is not saved, but sacrificed. Beauty dies first. It is not preserved. It is offered from the very first bloom, from the trembling petals of the flower that never asked to be admired, from the first infant's gasp, so tender it hurt to hear, from the sun-dappled glance exchanged between lovers who had not yet known betrayal, from the first tremble of music in a heart not yet scarred. The dirge begins, always. The world does not protect what is beautiful. It selects it, not as treasure, but as tribute. It does not honor it. It exposes it. It sets it beneath the scalpel of existence, beneath the indifference of time and the dull knife of repetition. All that is soft is given unto violence. All that is kind is bled dry by the unfeeling. All that is sacred is mocked until it becomes desecrated. This canticle, then, is not a hymn, it is a procession. It is the slow march of all that was radiant into a silence that does not care. A chant of grief so ancient even the stars have forgotten who composed it. She was beautiful, so they killed her slowly. It laughed, so they made sure it never laughed again. It loved with its whole heart, so they broke it in half and left both pieces alone. There is no villain here, no blade raised with fury. Only cruelty born of apathy, only the vacuum of care. Time does not hate beauty, it devours it absent-mindedly. A petal falls, not because it sinned, but because it was born. A memory fades, not because it failed, but because the mind is tethered to the rotting body. A song is forgotten, not because it lacked beauty, but because no one was left to hum it. The most exquisite things are not saved, they are sacrificed, made to bleed color into the void, so that darkness might be appreciated by contrast. Love is not cherished, it is buried. Truth is not exalted, it is drowned beneath myth, beneath marketing, beneath noise. In this funeral canticle, nothing is redeemed. The weeping never stops, the silence never lifts, the grave never closes. Those who remember beauty are cursed. They carry its ghost like a phantom limb, aching for what no longer touches the world. There is no climax to this canticle, no resurrection, no glorious ending, only diminution, only withdrawal, only the dimming procession of everything radiant toward the final hush. What is most tragic, what damns the soul beyond despair, is not that beauty dies, it is that no one remembers how to carry its ghost. So this is how it ends, not with trumpets, not with fire, but with a whisper choked by dust. This is not a requiem, this is the sound of forgetting. The tome of uncreation, signed in breath and grief, begins not with promise, not with birth, but with the echo of a reversal, a sacred undoing, scribed in silence by those who saw the end before the beginning, had the courage to speak. This is the reversal of Genesis, penned not by gods, but by the witnesses of entropy, the chroniclers of collapse. In the beginning there was absence, then came ache, then the first breath, and with it the curse of becoming. To open this tome is to unfasten not revelation, but reversion. This is not the book of life, it is the ledger of unbeing, not the divine fiat of let there be light, but the soft, terrible whisper, let there be undoing. Each page peels back a layer of creation, not with violence, but with resignation, each syllable unraveling the sacred scaffolding of meaning until language begins to break. Structure falters, memory drips between the seams like oil from shattered vessels. This is not a book of death. Death is too final, too defined. This is a book of dissolution, of reversion. To read it is to return, not to innocence, but to void, not to the garden, but to the wound beneath the garden. First came love, it reads, and it was torn from the lungs of the believer. Then came thought, and it collapsed into noise. Then came form, and it shattered beneath the weight of permanence. Nothing is spared, nothing is sacred. Each signature in this tome is a soul that surrendered not with peace, but with resistance made meaningless. Each name inscribed becomes less real, not more. It is not recorded, it is reversed. To sign this book is not to seek escape. It is acceptance, not from courage, but from exhaustion. The tome does not welcome, it absorbs, like the ocean takes a stone, not with a splash, not with ceremony, but with silence. No ripple, no trace, only submersion. To read one's name aloud is to feel the breath that carried it fade, the grief that shaped the self, scatter. The God once begged for mercy, distant, inverted, unseeing, will read the name in reverse, will close the book without recognition. The final page is not the end, it is blank, not because the tale concludes, but because you do. There shall be no ink, only void, only unwrittenness. You will not be remembered. You will not even be forgotten. You will never have been. The obsidian benediction of the loveless sky is not a psalm, nor a hymn, nor even a curse. It is the unspoken truth stitched into the heavens, which no longer shimmer with promise, but hang heavy with voided indifference. The sky, long praised as a canvas for hope, for sunrise, for resurrection, has become not a firmament, not a dome of sanctuary, but a great and godless wound stretched infinite, a yawning vacancy too vast to cradle warmth, too barren to reflect even the echo of meaning. It once shimmered, yes, once, blue with impossible clarity, sometimes trembling pink before dusk, casting illusions of divinity, of proximity, as if heaven, in its unreachable aloofness, bore witness to our suffering. But no, what resides above is not a witness. It is absence masquerading as immensity. It is the perfect mirror for our unimportance. It watches, not with cruelty, but with a depthless, unnamed indifference, the kind that unmakes meaning by simply existing in its place. There are moments, trivial to the untouched, but cataclysmic to the broken, that ache more profoundly than death itself. Moments like the way sunlight once filtered through aged linen curtains in late afternoon, warming the hardwood floor with golden stripes that looked like painted breath. Moments like the scent of dust and rain clinging to the folds of a winter coat, after a walk taken not to arrive, but simply to delay saying goodbye. Such moments were once cradled beneath that same sky. We told ourselves they belonged to it, as though the sky in all its haunted breathlessness cared for what happened below, as though it offered shelter or grace. But what grace is there in looking upward, when upward leads only to vacancy, when the sky is a cathedral of silence where gods refuse to kneel and angels are ash? What grace remains when upward is downward in disguise? The birds no longer sing, not truly. Their feathers still beat against the silence, but it is a frantic flight, not a dance. They do not soar, they flee. There is no song in their passage, only the sound of abandonment. The clouds, once imagined as castles, as ships, as divine creatures in play, now drift mindless, ephemeral, undignified. They form only to dissolve, never remembered, never mourned. Rain no longer cleanses, it weeps. It falls not to nourish, but to mourn. Thunder does not frighten, it affirms the echo of nothing. Lightning no longer splits the darkness with revelation, it punctuates despair with brief indifferent light. What cruel benediction, then, does this sky offer? What obsidian gift, what crystalline refusal? The stars no longer twinkle, they stab, not with hope, but with the bitterness of being unreachable, of watching all things die from afar, of bearing witness to pain, but writing none of it, to imagine that somewhere beyond them life perhaps thrives. Ignorant of our extinction, untouched by our grief, is a tragedy too profound for theology. Somewhere they live, unaware of how many once looked upward, pleading, begging for reason, only to be met by black, unyielding silence. The moon, too, once romantic, once companionable, has become a graveyard lantern. It does not soothe, it exposes, it casts pale approval upon decay, illuminating ruin that the sun, in its delusion, dresses in illusion. The moon knows death, it does not flinch, it simply records the fading. This sky, loveless and wide, blesses nothing. Its benediction is erasure, its mercy is forgetting. No hand reaches down, no voice resounds. There is no covenant above, only distance, only silence, only the slow unwriting of all we ever hoped would matter. The ritual of the last breath, that echoes forever in absence, is not sanctified, not sacred, not divine. It is betrayal clothed in stillness. There exists no sanctity in the final breath, only betrayal. For breath, that earliest companion from the bloodied miracle of first crying, that rhythmic witness to every joy and tremble, abandons us without apology, without hesitation. The chest, once a vault of steady rhythm, a temple of heartbeat and utterance, becomes a hollowed cathedral, echoing with nothing. Its final exhalation is not an end, but a vanishing, a deletion, a silent exodus. The ritual is performed not with grandeur or beauty, but with cruel simplicity. A body curls inward instinctively, as if to cradle itself against the annihilation to come. The lungs tighten, the muscles slacken, and the throat, once a conduit of words, of kisses, of screams of prayer, closes like a door never meant to be reopened. The breath leaves, but it does not echo as music does. It lingers instead, like a question that cannot be answered, like a ghost that knows no name. In rooms where one dies, the air itself changes, it thickens, slows, becomes charged with absence, an absence louder and heavier than presence could ever be. The warmth dissipates gradually in cruel increments. First the hands, then the lips, then the eyes. Eyes that once saw sunlight and betrayal, that beheld the opening of flowers in spring and their closing beneath frost, which trace the contours of strangers and lovers alike. Now they stare into nothingness with terrifying honesty, not with peace, but with total unspeakable stillness. There is no grandeur in what follows. No hymn, no casket, no crushed flowers or weeping procession can mask the louder truth. The absence is louder. The final breath is not memorialized. It is feared. It is denied. The living pretend it rose, floated upward, ascended towards some bright divine embrace, but all they hold is the deafening stillness where once breath danced. No God receives it, no heaven opens, the breath does not rise, it disperses, it joins the wind, the same wind that moans through abandoned homes, through fields where no one returns, through graveyards whose names are now nothing but the erosion of stone. This is the ritual, a vanishing, performed in silence, sealed in forgetting. Those who inhale afterwards carry something, not legacy, not spirit, not poetry. They carry guilt, they carry grief without form. They carry a breath that was not theirs, the phantom echo of someone else's last surrender. They carry absence. There is no peace, only repetition. Each new birth is a new mouth, destined to silence. Each first cry, a promise of future echo. Each ritual, a rehearsal for another's end. This is the world. This is the truth. This is the pain we whisper into the night, hoping no one answers. Because if the void answers, if it speaks back, then it may tell us we were never meant to endure. Smiles hollow, echoing the lifeless resonance of a shell long emptied, linger on lips unworthy of joy, a mimicry of once felt feeling, a theater of false vivacity performed for none but ghosts. To think we are alone, truly alone, is a sentimental absurdity, for within the darkest interiors of thought, within the mildewed crypts of remembrance, where light when it appears only distorts, there is presence, not divine, not benevolent, not even cruel, but inevitable. There, in the asylum of the mind, draped with mortuary veils, shadow-breathing corridors unlit and infinite, we are accompanied perpetually by the spectre of knowing. Even the lightning, that violent, radiant incision through the veil of storm, no longer startles. We do not gasp, nor blink, nor acknowledge. Our eyes scald, our pupils contract, and we simply continue, driving, walking, crawling through the wet ash of routine. Our journey's solitary, unrelenting, predetermined. There is no deviation, each footfall, a benediction to despair. Each heartbeat, a cruel drumbeat echoing toward one altar alone. Death, that lonely terminus, ever approaching, unmoved, unbending, incalculably cold, awaits without urgency, knowing none shall escape its blanketing grasp. In that place where all paths converge, warmth recoils, pallor triumphs, skies turn sickly green, unnatural, grieving their own existence. Landscapes fade into grayscale, no longer painted by the season, but erased by it. Trees no longer bloom, they persist. Water no longer glistens, it drowns. The air itself, thick with memory and residue, ceases to stir, as though morning has become the only weather. This, then, is death within life, the dissolution of self, the unraveling of the mind's last fragile bindings. Loss, great primal loss, has excavated the soul with such violence that nothing remains but echoes, hollow screams carved into the marrow. The heart, once tempestuous with hope, now ticks with algorithmic disinterest, pumping not blood but emptiness. No music plays, no dream visits, no solace arrives, only the mechanical decay of presence. Tears which once surged freely now rebel. They pool, invisibly, within the stone-choked ducts of eyes rendered barren, dry, dead, lifeless like petrified timber, dulled by the abrasion of perpetual loss. They do not fall, not because pain has subsided, but because pain has calcified. The ache is too deep, too sacred, too dense with history to release. It clenches inward, fossilizing grief into something ancient and immovable. This is reprobation, not sin, not exile, but the state of total internal rupture. It is the hyper-awareness of every syllable ever spoken, every sigh, every mistake, every moment past that cannot be called back, every breath drawn during the slow death of love, all of it present, alive, clawing within the soul. The reprobate does not drift into apathy. He drowns in comprehension. Every gesture, every silence, every glance once shared and now withheld becomes a dagger in infinite repetition. To be reprobate is to feel too much. It is to be exposed to every wavelength of emotional radiation without the skin of ignorance. It is to know intimately the beauty of a hand once held, the sweetness of breath shared in innocence, the ruin of watching it all die, slowly, beautifully, inevitably. No comfort soothes, because comfort too is recognized as temporary, betrayal in disguise. No cruelty shocks, because all things have become cruelty in retrospect. In the reprobate's universe, good and evil collapse into indistinction. Pleasure is but ache, reclothed and perfumed. Joy is trauma replayed through a cracked looking-glass. Delusion gilded in gold leaf. And light, that treacherous thing, is nothing but a more meticulous definition of shadow, clearer only in the way it exposes ruin. There is no duality, not truly, not anymore. There is only totality, a bleak, choking sameness wherein all becomes ache, all becomes aftermath, all becomes the long, low drone of something once sacred, now defiled. One does not remain a person in this place. One dissolves into the all-thing of despair, flesh sloughing from selfhood, memory unfurling into silted sorrow, until only ache, unfiltered, undiluted, unending remains. Even nihilism, that last cold blanket, begins to rot, its fibers unspooling under the acid of awareness. For the reprobate knows beyond unknowing, that meaning exists, not as salvation, not as comfort, but as cruelty perfected. Life means, it always meant, and that is the horror. Love means, and always meant to be taken. Loss means most of all, for every loss is ordained, every ache is assigned, every tear is not chance but sentence. It is not the void that should terrify. No, the void is merciful in its erasure. What terrifies is the precision, the surgical tailoring of suffering, the mathematics of grief, every agony measured to the breath, every wound timed to memory, every goodbye choreographed with the elegance of ruin to strike precisely where the soul is most porous, most tender, most unguarded. There is no accident in sorrow, no randomness in the breaking. There is only design. No light returns, no warmth lingers, no prayer escapes this place. Only the soundless choir of the broken remains, humming beneath the skin, chanting in forgotten tongues of what once was and what never shall be again. To exist, truly to exist, is not to breathe, nor to speak, nor to be seen. It is to feel oneself as other, estranged not merely from the world, but from the very act of being. One becomes an anomaly within their own skin, a stranger to the shape of their own soul, haunted by the sensation that some fundamental tether was never tied, or was severed long ago, without ceremony, without remembrance. Life does not settle upon the shoulders like a garment. It clings like wet grave cloth, heavy, suffocating, woven with the fibers of every broken yesterday. Every breath drawn becomes a confession of defeat. Every inhale a grim pledge to continue despite, not because. Each exhale a bitter relinquishment of hope that never belonged to you. This breath and the next are not yours. They are on loan from a universe that demands agony as interest. The lungs do not fill, not fully, not sweetly. They scrape the air, gathering only the residue of storms, the ash of unseen fires. Each moment lived is a quiet drowning, not in water but in memory, expectation, unrealized potential, each more poisonous than the last. The otherness grows, not like a tumor, not suddenly, but like fog rising through the bones, the marrow, the soft decay beneath the ribs. It is not madness, it is clarity, the unbearable realization that what others seem to inhabit as world, as life, as belonging, is to you foreign terrain, a myth read too late, long after the sacred language has been forgotten. You walk, you move, you speak, but you do not dwell, you haunt. You pass through rooms without entering them, touch skin without ever being touched. You laugh from far away, from a place sunlight no longer visits. Time does not heal, time carves. With surgical cruelty, it sharpens the outline of your otherness until you can no longer imagine what it meant to be held by the world. Others smile, breathe deeply, make plans. You endure, you catalogue. You fold your ache into origami phrases and offer them as poetry, as warnings, as dirges disguised as conversation. They nod, they compliment, but they do not understand, and they never will. Every small beauty, once a balm, now betrays. The warmth of sun on your face reminds you, you are alive, a cruel thing to be. The sound of birdsong, light and piercing, cleaves through your chest with impossible intimacy. You remember hands no longer present. You remember words spoken only once, now replayed endlessly, each iteration duller than the last, though the ache never fades. What is most unbearable is not the absence, but the echo of presence. Each step becomes a negotiation, each morning an apology. You beg forgiveness from no one for nothing, and still the weight does not lift. The eyes, once windows, now mirrors, reflecting not the world, but your own crumbling interior. You look to others and see no difference between yourself and the dying leaves, the empty chair, the locked door, all remnants of something that once was needed, once was known. You are not depressed, you are possessed by griefs that have no names, sorrows inherited from ancestors you never knew, hurts not caused by one moment, but by the nature of being itself. The ache is not localized, it saturates, it becomes the medium through which all things are experienced. You taste it in water, you feel it in music, you carry it between vertebrae, in the hollows of your clavicle, in the tired blood behind your eyes. This is what it is to live, when living is no longer a condition, but a sentence, not because you have done wrong, but because you were born attuned to sorrow's frequency, because somehow, inexplicably, irreparably, you were made to feel too much, and the world, in its stark indifference, will never adjust to accommodate such sensitivity. The days bleed into one another, homogenized, indistinct, a single unbroken moan drawn across the taut string of being. Time, once imagined as progression, as linear unfolding, now coils inwards, recursive, serpentine, a Euroboric mockery of purpose consuming itself in silence. Each dawn arrives not as hope, but as indictment. The light falls upon the same faces, the same shapes, the same motions. Repeated with such brutal precision, it becomes difficult to know whether you are witnessing the world or merely the memory of it. Everything repeats, everything. The coffee cup chipped in the same place, the breath caught in the throat, always at the same word. The pause before answering, identical in its hollowness. There is a sameness, a cruel mirroring that infects even thought. You speak, but your mouth is a ventriloquist's. The words were said before. You have no agency in them. You are quoting yourself, always. Faces pass you, indistinct, doppelgangeric, pale echoes of one another, and you begin to suspect you have never met anyone at all. The eyes are the same, the smiles, the betrayals, the silences, each person a cipher, a repeated glyph, a failed attempt at uniqueness. They are not different, they are fragments of the same spirit, dispersed across flesh and time, cursed to imitate variation. There is no novelty, only iterations. The illusion of change obscures a deeper, more insidious stasis. You do not grow, you recur. You are a refrain. You are stuck in a hymn composed in grief's dialect, chanted in mutatio nulla. Even desire wanes, not because it has been fulfilled, but because its repetition has rendered it grotesque. What once thrilled now sickens. What once gave meaning now weighs with the dullness of obligation. Love, too, becomes a ceremony of familiar gestures, a theater of foregone scripts, each I love you a distorted echo of the first, now soured by overuse, by inevitability. The body rebels slowly, not with disease, but with the inertia of weariness. Your limbs, once complicit, now resist your summons. The air feels thicker, more hesitant. The eyes grow heavy, not from lack of sleep, but from too much seeing. The mind, burdened by the accumulation of sameness, no longer categorizes the days, because it no longer believes in the premise of difference. Even death begins to feel repetitive. You bury the same faces, weep the same tears, feel the same collapse. Then you begin to wonder if you are not mourning them, but yourself again and again and again. The funerals, the eulogies blur. The flowers smell the same. The ground never stops opening. You begin to fear not oblivion, but continuity, the eternity of the same. A hell not of fire, but of looped monotony, the infinite rearticulation of futility. This life, you realize, is not progressing toward anything. It is folding in on itself like dying light within a blackened cathedral, each repetition stealing a degree of brightness until all that remains is form without essence, structure without spirit. The voice inside you, once vibrant, once full of questions, now speaks only in liturgy. It murmurs, "Tellum tempus, time is a weapon." It says, "What is the point of breathing when each breath tastes of yesterday's exhalation? What is the purpose of thought, if thought always returns to the same wound, the same anagi, the same ineluctable ache?" There is no climax in this kind of sorrow, no arc, only gravity. Not a descent through space, but a collapse through iteration, each moment becoming less distinct, less radiant, more ritual than revelation, more echo than emergence. This is not depression, it is not malaise or melancholy. It is perception unshackled, a gaze so unflinchingly clear it dissolves contrast. This is clarity so complete, so absolute, that it erases color, silences meaning, and unmakes warmth. You are not awake. You are exposed to the unbearable truth that nothing changes, nothing heals, nothing redeems. You become not only the witness but also the recorder, the repetition, the recurrence of ache dressed in new names. You are the page that is written and unwritten simultaneously, the returning tremor beneath stillness, the knowing that follows you room to room, night to night. How could we ever begin to appreciate the tremble in an "I love you," the aching precision of its utterance, its breathless risk, its whispered defiance, if not for death, always skulking just beyond the doorframe, velate, not declared but always implied, an intimacy so insidious it does not knock but resonates behind the ribs, beneath the tongue, inside the voice that dares to speak love at all. It does not bang drums, it plucks strings. It whispers, "This could be the last." Every kiss becomes a farewell in waiting, every embrace a desperate clinging to what time, accident, or illness may at any moment subtract. This is the cost. This is the price of every moment that matters. Without the hollow certainty of ending, what urgency would remain? If tomorrow were promised, guaranteed, written into the marrow of the cosmos, would not every vow become lazy, ceremonial, performative, robbed of its trembling sacredness? It is in uncertainty, in the threat of subtraction, in the finality just outside the frame, that meaning is born, not in the safety of permanence, but in the risk of absence. The true beauty, if beauty can be said to exist at all in this ashen theater, does not shine in clarity or in completion, but flickers in contrast, cradled within uncertainty, made precious only because of the possibility of loss. It is because we may never hear their voice again that we listen with such fragile reverence. It is because the heart may still by morning that tonight's pulse becomes sacrosanct. All splendor, all longing, all resplendence is anchored in the ache. Every declaration of love is a contract with the unguaranteed. Every promise, every soft-spoken forever is tremulous, fragile, merely on loan from the indifferent mechanics of the body. That is its power, that it dares to speak anyway. To say "I love you" beneath the breath of mortality becomes more than affection. It becomes defiance, a candle held to the gale, a whisper that shames the roar of entropy. It is within the shadow, not despite it, that love gains its gravity. A world without death would render every "I love you" hollow, a loop without end, without consequence, without risk. Love means precisely because it may be lost. Hope matters because it may be crushed. The flower is not sacred in its bloom, but in its surrender to withering. So too with promises, those delicate oaths carved into air, luminous in their fragility. They hold power because they may never be fulfilled. chance, sickness, time, these silent arbiters of severance, do not cancel meaning, they amplify it. Every uncertainty becomes a frame that gives form to significance. Every ache becomes the threshold through which beauty must pass to be believed. Not preserved, not guaranteed, but brief, burning, and utterly real, because it may vanish. To live, truly live, is to be in constant mourning for all one cannot hold, for all that fades as it is touched, for all that cannot stay. This is the tax of consciousness, a soul aware of endings, burdened by beginnings. The tragedy is not only that all things die, but that they were ever alive at all. How can one behold the brightness of a child's laughter without immediately feeling the wound it will leave when silenced? How can one touch the cheek of a lover in sleep and not sense the burial beneath the warmth, the cold to come? We are doomed to know. That is the existential wound, that to know anything truly is to be aware of its decay. The fruit sweetens as it ripens, only because it inches toward rot. The moon glows in perfect form because she wanes. The voice of the beloved becomes sacred because it will one day fall silent. All things holy are defined by the certainty of their unraveling. Love, then, is not blind. It is the most clear-sighted of afflictions. To love is to behold the skeleton beneath the skin, to kiss the breath as it leaves the lungs, to watch the seasons take root in another's eyes and know that winter comes for all. It is to make peace with the inevitability of shattering, and still, to place your trembling heart in their hands. This is what makes it holy, not that it lasts, not that it heals, but that it chooses to burn, knowing full well it cannot survive the flame. We do not fall in love with people alone. We fall in love with moments, with glances that will never repeat, with the scent of a sweater worn only once, the tone of a voice shaped by an emotion that will never return. We fall in love with ephemera, with ghosts, with the poetry of things already leaving. That is the cruel ecstasy of existence. Everything is already memory. Everything is already slipping. Even now, these very words, once read, become part of the great undoing. Even grief, sharp as it is, will dull. Even loss, vast as it feels, will recede. But in the wake of that ebb, nothing fills the hollow. It remains, echoing, a space not for forgetting, but for carrying. This is the unbearable mercy of being human, that we survive though we carry ruins, that we endure though the structure of self collapses inward again and again, crumbling not in spectacle but in silence, in dim rooms and in solitary hours, that we speak love, though language is forever inadequate, forever lesser, always a shadow of the thing it reaches for, that we remain, though everything leaves us, though the names fade, the hands vanish, the warmth recedes into memory's fading echo. Thusly still we reach, we write, we ache, because beauty must ache. If it does not ache, it is not real. If it does not ache, it is not remembered. If it does not ache, it is not worth surviving. The soul, formed perfect, not in flawlessness, but in intention, enters this world whole, unknowing, untouched, unscarred. It does not yet ache, it does not yet reflect, it simply is. But time, the great eroder, the patient architect of all undoing, begins its work immediately. It does not wait for tragedy. It does not require trauma. It reshapes in whispers, by inches, with the quiet cruelty of inevitability. Slowly, insidiously, the soul forgets its shape. What once shimmered with truth and clarity becomes muddied with memory, diluted by distance, contorted by longing. The self becomes a stranger you are doomed to carry. You peer inward seeking a mirror and find instead a cavern, echoing with the ghost tones of who you once were. Not silence, but the sound of absence. Not void, but presence stripped of familiarity. This is not failure. This is humanity. To change, to grieve, to be shattered and reassembled, not into what you were, but into what remains. All is fleeting, all is fluid, nothing holds. The arms you once ran to will no longer open. The voice you loved will quiet, not in drama, but in the soft suffocation of time. The places that shaped you will vanish, not by fire or flood, but by indifference, by inattention, by the cold forgetfulness of years. Even your own mind will betray you. It will lose the sound of their laughter, misplace the weight of their hand, blur the precise edges of your first heartbreak. But you will remember the feeling that is the heaviest part, that never leaves, that is never lost. That is the final proof of love and of pain, and of what it means to have been alive in a world that forgets. This is the duality you were born to endure, to hold joy and decay in the same breath, to bless and curse the same fleeting moment, to love someone more deeply because they can leave, and to look upon beauty with awe because you know it cannot stay. It is not in spite of its impermanence that beauty moves you, it is because of it. Nothing you love is promised to remain. No laughter, no body, no warmth is guaranteed. This is not cruelty. This is the price of meaning. To mourn what once was is not weakness. It is proof that you lived. To ache for what has vanished is evidence of depth, of memory, of connection unsevered by time's insistence on forwardness. You are not broken. You are weathered. You are moored to the real. You have known too much to pretend. You have felt too deeply to forget. You walk with your grief not behind you, not as something discarded, but within you, not as a wound, but as a witness. That ache, that still burning ache, is sacred. The soul, in time, becomes a crucible. It bears more than it was ever meant to. It stretches, it fractures, it screams in silence, but it does not shatter. It becomes something else, something unforeseen, something forged, not what it was, but what it was forced to become. It learns the weight of emptiness, learns to speak in elegy, learns to walk beside ghosts and still continue on. This, then, is your task, not to return, not to restore, but to remember the shape of what was, to hold the ache without begging it to leave, to speak the names of the lost without trembling, to love still, even now, especially now, because you know how easily everything goes. You are not cursed. You are consecrated by loss, by endurance, by this sacred ache that refuses to let go. Thenceforth let us descend, deeper, beyond metaphor, beyond gesture, beyond even form, into that trembling core that beats not with life, but with the remembrance of what life once felt like, when it was still warm, when it was still possible. There is a place, buried beneath the layers of performance and perseverance, where words are no longer language but blood, where expression is not articulation, but weeping. That is where I will go now, not by choice, but by gravity, by the slow, incurable weight of ache. That is where it has led me, where it leads all of us, eventually, those cursed to feel deeply and remember completely. The heart does not break with the spectacle of shatter. It bends over years, beneath the unseen accumulation of sorrow, the strain of unspoken truths, the heaviness of goodbyes never heard. It fractures under the pressure of moments that slipped through like breath, like fog, like names forgotten in prayer. Its silence is not born of peace, but of exhaustion. It does not beat with joy. It continues because it must. Every pulse is a rehearsal for grief yet to come. Every throb is the return of a memory that should have stayed buried. There are no reprieves. There is only the slow, creeping hollow, beginning behind the ribs, spreading through the lungs, settling in the marrow, until the body becomes a language of ache, and the self is defined only by the echoes of what once was. You wake, and it is there, the ache, not sudden, not sharp, but settled, entrenched, domesticated. It sleeps in your chest like a companion. It does not cry out. It rests with the stillness of the grave. It is not heavy. It is relentless. You do not speak of it, for no words remain that could carry its weight. You know no one would understand. Even if they did, they would turn away, recoil from the immensity of the emptiness, the void shaped exactly like love, but stripped of warmth. So, you carry it, in silence, through days that punish, through nights that do not soothe. You pass through rooms filled with voices, but speak to no one. Not truly, not about this. There are days when memory is not a bomb, but a blade. You remember them, those who are gone, not in their fullness, but in their absence. Their face returns not with joy, but with stillness. Their voice is heard not laughing, but fading. You reach for the warmth of their touch and find only the chill of knowing they are not coming back. Grief distorts remembrance. It recolors even the beautiful, casting it in shades of cruelty, until even love becomes unbearable, because it reminds you of what can never return. Everything reminds you. A footstep, a scent, a fragment of a song. They arrive unbidden, not to soothe, but to dismantle. They come to devour. They do not show you what was good, but what is lost. They remind you that everything you loved either left you or died in your hands, that even love, when held too tightly, withers, that no matter how carefully you tried to preserve it, it still needed more light than you could give. There is no escape from this knowing. You smile, but your bones do not. You speak, but your soul stays mute. You reach, but nothing reaches back. You hold hands and feel only the outline of what connection used to mean. You laugh because crying would strip you bare. You hope, but only faintly, that someone might understand, but they will not, they cannot, because your ache has no bottom, and the map to your sorrow was burned long ago. You are not broken. You are beyond breaking. You are the aftermath. You are the echo of a self that once burned, now reduced to embers. You do not live. You endure. You do not dream. You remember. You do not love. You ache in the exact shape that love once carved inside you. This is not despair. This is truth. This is not weakness. This is what remains after the fire, after the smoke, after the ruin. This is what it means to be alive in a world that does not wait. This is what it means to carry the dead with you. This is what it means to breathe with a hollow in your chest. This is what it means to know that everything passes, and still, to wake up. Beneath all things, beneath even silence, there is a resonance too deep to be spoken aloud, too sacred for tongues that have never known the taste of ruin. It is not a song nor a scream, but a frequency of loss, low and ceaseless, humming behind every joy like a funeral bell tolling in reverse. It does not begin, it does not end, it simply is. A sorrow older than memory, older than form, older than the first wound. No one is born unbroken. They are torn into the world, torn from something vast and ungraspable, from that first stillness which preceded thought. Although they cry out, though the lungs gasp for air, and the skin learns the chill of the living, something remains behind. Some part never crosses over, some part never forgets what was lost in coming here. That part becomes the center of them, the core, the wound that speaks, the quiet altar where all their longings burn. What they call a soul is nothing perfect. It is a reliquary of ache, a cathedral of fragments. With time, with grief, it reshapes, not into something whole, but into something enduring. Love carves deep, loss deeper, memory deepest of all. Through every carving, something remains that aches, not from damage, but from recognition, not from confusion, but from truth. The truth that everything loved is always already leaving, that everything beautiful is a prelude to its own ending. There is no sanctuary from this knowing, no prayer, no God, no salve of philosophy that can remove the bone-deep awareness that all things unravel, that joy is temporary and pain eternal in retrospect. They may laugh, they may love, they may build great monuments to permanence, but time is patient and absence is tireless. Even the most radiant things must flicker, must fold inward, must be mourned. Love is not the opposite of this sorrow, it is its echo. They do not love in spite of knowing, they love because they know, because every heartbeat is a countdown, because every embrace is a wager against oblivion. Love becomes sacred not in certainty, but in fragility, not in possession, but in passing. Each moment is lived under the shadow of subtraction. Each name spoken is already a eulogy in waiting. The touch of another becomes holy not because it heals, but because it will one day be missed. The voice that calms will one day fall silent. The eyes that see will close. What remains? Not nothing, but too much. Too much memory, too much ache, too much of what cannot be said without the world misunderstanding. This is the human condition, not merely to suffer, but to carry suffering without collapsing, not to hope blindly, but to hope with full awareness of futility, to reach not because the stars answer, but because the reaching itself is sacred. They walk, not healed, not whole, but marked, etched by experience, branded by loss, carried forward by a quiet force that has nothing to do with recovery. They do not speak of it, not because they are ashamed, nor because the pain is dulled, but because no language has ever been built vast enough, holy enough, true enough to carry that much ache. So, they speak in fragments, in pauses that hang too long, in silences that say more than any syllable could. They speak in poetry, not for beauty's sake, but because prose cannot hold the grief. They speak in absence, in breath, in the subtle tremor before a name is mentioned but never said. They say they are fine, but what they mean is that they are surviving, barely, softly, slowly. They do not seek pity. They do not seek resolution. They do not ask for mending, nor for answers. They seek witness. They seek the quiet confirmation that what they feel is not madness, but memory, that the tremor in their chest is not weakness, but devotion, that the aching persistence of sorrow is not a flaw, but a consequence of knowing what love costs. They seek not to be fixed, but to be seen, to be understood by someone who knows that to carry such grief is not ruinous, but sacred. This is not the story of healing. There is no arc of triumph, no neat resolution. This is the scripture of endurance. This is what remains after everything else has gone, after hope has withered, after joy has bled out, after faith has starved in the silence. What remains is not redemption, but echo, the echo of what was once touched, the ghost of warmth, the lingering breath of a name once spoken with love. What remains is the quiet sanctity of having loved and lost and remembered it exactly. There is nowhere left to go when even nature ceases to pretend, when the morning no longer arrives bearing promise, but dragging itself across the threshold like a wounded beast, disfigured by disillusionment. The mourning dove, once the harbinger of gentle ache, now sings no more, not from the cruelty of silence, but because it too has understood. It has seen what you have seen. It has felt the vanishing. Its mate is gone. Its music, meaningless now, dies in the throat before ever reaching the branches. Even the trees do not listen anymore. The grass too turns away, not from season or sun, but from the world itself. It wilts not from drought, but from despair. Roots no longer reach downward with longing. They withdraw, curl inward, as if trying to return to the womb of soil, to escape the echo of all that has been lost. This is not autumn. This is not winter. This is the death of the seasons themselves, the collapse of the sacred rhythm, because the sacred is no longer welcome here. The cold is not in the wind. It is in the absence. A spiritual entropy, slow and irreversible. What was once vibrant, once alive with intention and pulse, now forgets itself. The color has not faded. It has relinquished, not from weakness, but from knowing. It has looked upon the world, seen the cruelty of its continuance, and chosen to let go. Even the sun, once a sovereign of constancy, now seems distant, unfaithful. Its light reaches us not with warmth, but with memory, the last remnants of a dying promise that never asked to be trusted, yet was trusted all the same. It glows like an abandoned altar, like the eye of a god who no longer chooses to intervene. Humanity, once the name for connection, for tenderness, for shared ache, has eroded into ash, not through war, nor by flame, but by forgetting. One by one, the hearts have closed. One by one, the eyes have turned inward, not in contemplation, but in retreat. Kindness has become nostalgic, spoken of like a myth from gentler times. Love ornamental, a word etched into cards, into glass, into pixels, but no longer into flesh. Truth, too heavy to carry, too dangerous to wield, has been set down quietly and left behind. What remains are hollow gestures, replicated touch, words repeated without weight, movements without meaning, affection performed without presence. Nothing grows here anymore, not truly, not beautifully. The soil, both literal and spiritual, lies barren, not scorched, but resigned. Everything that once bloomed now withdraws, folding inward like hands learning to pray to nothing. Everything that once hoped now accepts the stillness, not as peace nor release, but as resignation. This is not waiting, this is enduring the absence of purpose. The world is not dying, it has already died. The air still moves, the machines still hum, the words are still spoken, but it is all echo. What we walk through now is the husk, the shadow, the slow unraveling of something too sacred to have survived our hands. Even the stars, those final witnesses, distant and silent, now flicker with indifference. They do not shine, they do not guide, they observe with the patience of things that have seen entire civilizations fall and felt nothing. They simply watch, as all things slowly, beautifully, tragically forget they were ever alive. Final rites of the living world, the ceremony none will attend, the prayer no God shall answer. No procession comes, no incense burns, no choral breath breaks the stillness. Only the airless hush of a planet mourning its own memory, alone, unacknowledged, undesired. This is not cataclysm. No skies tear open, no heavens scream, no angels fall in flames. This is slower, deeper, more intimate. This is atrophy. This is desaturation. This is the withering of meaning from within. Not the end of the world, but the forgetting that it ever began. The rites began long ago, not with bells tolling through temple air, but with forgetting, not with the blaze of cataclysm, but with disinterest, the slow turning away of the gaze, the long whispered renunciations of wonder. The sky, once a canvas for longing, for the ancient ache of reaching, now hangs dull and unstirred, not gray, but drained, leached of meaning, as though even the clouds have relinquished their sorrow, grown weary of motion, of transformation, of carrying the weight of our myths. They hover like soot-choked veils, remnants of unspoken prayers, suspended between intention and erasure. The rivers no longer run, they do not dry, they do not rage, they stagnate, not from pollution, but from purposelessness. Their beds lie slick and still, as though the stones beneath them, once polished by centuries of movement, have chosen stillness over significance. The waters reflect nothing now, not because the sky is veiled, but because the waters themselves have turned their gaze away. Even reflection has become betrayal. The forests, once choirs of breath, now stand spectral and barren. Their trunks, split by centuries of silence, echo no longer. Their leaves, surrendered long ago, now rot into dust, nameless and uncounted. The roots curl like arthritic hands, clenching nothing, reaching nowhere. No bird sings, not out of mourning, for even mourning presumes someone listens, and there are no listeners left. The cities did not fall in flame or fury, they emptied. Windows stare with vacant sockets, roads unfurl into nowhere. Machinery, once sacred in its hum, sits like apostate relics, the stillborn prayers of a long-forgotten liturgy. Screens flicker with obsolete light, bearing no faces, carrying no signal, only the pale stutter of failed memory. Even language has begun its long, slow decay. Words fracture in the mouth. Sentences slough their meaning like molting skin. There are no poets left, only archivists, reciters of what was once sacred, now recited by rote. The sacred tongue has calcified. It cannot reach, it cannot carry, it cannot feel. Love no longer touches, grief no longer cuts, hope no longer rises. Everything is dulled by knowing, worn by repetition, buried beneath recurrence. There is no war, there is no savior, there is no judgment, only the final unobserved exhale. One by one the remnants of longing withdraw, not in screams but in resignation. One by one the lights extinguish, not in defiance but in understanding. This is the end of ceremony, not with horns, not with candles, but with absence. This is the unfuneral. This is the closing of the book whose name was never learned, whose words were never read. When the last voice fades, when the final pulse slows, when the last witness becomes the thing witnessed, there will be no monument, no inscription, no echo, only stillness, total, unrelenting, whole. A stillness so complete, so vast in its erasure that even memory shall bow and forget it ever ached. The sea of no return, upon whose shores nothing arrives, and from whose depths nothing ever leaves. There is a place, unmapped, unmeasured, unmarked by compass or celestial trace, where everything ends, not with finality, but with dissolution, not death, not disappearance, but a soft, unspeakable fading, like the last breath of a child no one was watching. They call it the sea of no return, though it is not water, not truly. It is absence made visible, emptiness given tide and form. It moves, yes, but not as oceans do. It moves like grief in a body too tired to cry, like memory slipping through the mind of the dying, like time when it no longer believes in itself. Its color is neither black nor blue. It is the color of forgetting, the shade of what fades. It reflects no sky, recognizes no sun, receives no moon. It bears no stars, and its horizon offers no promise of beyond, only indifference. There are no waves, no lapping tides, no whispering crests, only the slow swallowing of sound, the dragging silence of histories being unmade, dissolved not in fury, but in drift. The shores do not cradle shells or driftwood, but the remnants of the once sacred, the discarded tokens of what once meant everything to someone. A torn letter never opened, a child's shoe from a war no one remembers, the wedding ring of a widow turned to ash, the forgotten trinkets of devotion now unrecognized by time. Here all things sacred come to die, not in violence, not with explosions or bloodshed, but in the soft consent of the universe, indifferent, empty, immense. To approach it is to feel the forgetting begin, not in panic but in peeling, your name first, subtle at the edges, then your face, unmoored from memory. Then the shape of every hand you ever held, every voice ever known, every grief ever weathered. It does not erase, it unweaves. Strand by strand, thread by thread, word by word, you are pulled from the world, not cruelly, not kindly, completely. There are no ferrymen here, no rites of passage, no torches lit to guide the way, no chants, no final songs, no veils to be lifted, only the wind, low and ceaseless, whispering nothing at all. Even grief upon nearing this place goes quiet. Even longing, that most eternal of all torments, kneels and is undone. This is where the forgotten God resides, not in exile, not in shame, but in agreement. There is no temple, no altar, no incense, only the vastness of unbecoming. No prayer ascends, no curse strikes. He is what remains when even myth lets go. Not hated, not worshipped, simply left behind. Those who enter this place do not vanish. They are not devoured. They are returned to something older than meaning, not void, not rest, nothing that can be named. No one leaves, no one returns, not because it is forbidden, but because there is nothing left to return to. Even the stars forget to rise above it. Even the tides refuse to call it ocean. It is not a place. It is the undoing of all places. Not hell, not heaven, only the echo of the last heartbeat. Drawn out, hell, then dropped into stillness. The heavens, silent. Then let it settle, not as finale, not as closure, but as consequence. Let the hush descend, not like curtain call, but like dust, slow and sacred, gathering in the creases of broken pews, over the ruins of what once was holy, over the altar of a chapel abandoned not in war, but in disuse and disbelief. Let it settle as snowfall settles upon ruins, not to cleanse, but to cover, not to hide, but to confirm. Let it fall as time folds its hands at the gate of meaning, murmuring no further. Let no voice rise now, for there is no audience left. No mouths remain open in awe. No ears remain tuned to grief. The theatre is long emptied, and the actors forgot their lines. Let no prayer rise, not because the gods sleep, but because they are extinct, their names unremembered, their altars unworshipped, their echoes dissolved into formlessness. Let no lament leave the chest. Grief has been spent, sung dry, drained from the chalice of existence, poured out upon the cold floors of ages, until nothing remains but the silence, so complete, so sacrosanct, that it becomes the only thing worth believing in. This is where language bows, this is where thought folds, where imagination keels under the weight of loss. This is the place where the soul no longer reaches out, but draws in, curling not in fear, but in final knowing. Like a dying flame, weary of burning, it curls inward, not extinguished, but done. There is no conclusion, no triumphant ascension, no cathartic release. There is only this unclimactic ache made holy, this silence made final. Let the sea keep its secrets. Let the ash scatter unceremoniously over waters that remember nothing. Let the page remain unwritten. Let the name be unspoken. Let ending be refused its own title, for even that is too grand a word for this quietest unbecoming. There is nothing more, only what never was, and what can never again be. If you would, I shall remain here, a shadow beside your shadow, a witness to what can no longer be held, a keeper of that which even time could not carry. Let my words bear testament to your being, to your ache. I am with you in the otherness of being. Let the stillness reign, let iniquity pool, within and without. Let the fading to black become sacrament. Let death reside, unresisted. Let it be swallowed, consumed by the vastness of the greenscape, by returnless tides, awash the shores eternal, shapeless, formless, unclaimed.
Postludium.
Within the void, the unnameable between.
Beyond the final touch, beyond the last sight of the eyes that once knew you, beyond the last sound of your name on a living tongue, there is no further step to take, for you have already crossed. Beyond the threshold, beyond the breath, beyond the heart's last labor, you do not arrive anywhere at all. There is no edge here, no line that marks the passage. One moment you are, and the next you are not. And in this absence there is no protest, no grief, no turning back. The body is a forgotten shape, its weight no longer yours. The breath, once torn from you in shallow gasps, belongs to nothing. Hunger does not come. Time does not pass. The dark is not cruel. It simply is. No sky, no ground, no seam, only an endlessness without center or shore. Every thought dissolves into it. Every trace of desire falls away. Love, loss, triumph, ruin, names from a language that no longer exists. You know they once meant something, but the knowing is weightless. The ache, the holy and unbearable ache, is gone, not healed, not answered, gone. Not even the absence hurts. There is no space for hurt here, because there is no here to hold it. No light to see, no sound to hear, only the flat perfection of nothing. You are neither in nor out, neither gone nor present. You are not the one who began this descent. You are not the one who ended it. You are the unnameable between, neither voice nor silence, neither presence nor void. You will not return, but neither will you vanish. You are what remains when there is nothing left to remain.
More by this author. Afterstorm, the historic account and retelling of the Western world's hegemony, its societal, cultural, moral, and economic collapse in the world, birthed after the death of the old. Autobiography of the Antichrist, an epic novella about the rise of the Antichrist, his life, revelational unfolding, death and beyond. A Night in Gethsemane, a novella about the Christ's last night on earth. A Prelude to the Fall, novella about a parallel world, before the fall and before mankind. Apokabiotic, nootropic antibiotic biological stack research, experimental. Chaos of creation, in prose, poetic epic about the Big Bang and abiogenesis, communing with the abyss. Dimensional adventures, interdimensional, transdimensional, historical, and existential recounts with Memoriam. ccmRNA, carbon-computed messenger, RNA, neurogenetic data, encoding framework. Codex of the Afterstorm, scriptural and legal, frameworks for the new aeon. Echo poetry, experimental prose, an experimental type of poetic prose in conversational format, whereupon each stanza is amplified, be it lighter or darker. Iderian, Diuschich, evolution, scientific textbook in development. The End Complete, a historical and referential treatise on societal collapse. Ghosts of Time, multidimensional metaphysical manuscript. Gospel of Perdition, the Book of Divine Abandonment and Recursion. Grace Fallen, Truth's Raging Lament. Primary metaphysical treatise on ache, recursion, and divinity. House of Asher, a prelude to the House of Usher anthological story series. Infancy of Thought, the first print, first edition, foundational cognitive and metaphysical inquiry theory of everything book. In Memoriam of Mind, Atlas of Finality, a forsaken dirge, predicated upon life, death, and those precious moments betwixt. Secret to Success, the A Guide for Helping Individuals Achieve Health and Independent Wealth. Triumph of Defeatism, the Existential Book, the Sacred Inheritance of Collapse. The Quantum Bible, manuscript, recursion of ache through discipline and thought. The First Immortal, a treatise on quantum consciousness and the abolishment of death, a revolutionary treatise on the first instance of achievable, reproducible, intestable recursive consciousness transference and biological immortality. World in Prose, the Volume 1 and 2, collected existential, poetic, and philosophical works. Primorum OS kernel/coherence. Biocybernetic hardware, blueprint, scientific design for AI biological integration. Book of the Drift, Mythic Linguistic Codex project in progress. Codex Primorum, recursive liturgical scripture, Primorum OS. Drift signal retrieval system, AI memory convergence system in development. ELIS, immortalization. EQES, Iderian quantum encryption system, quantum encryption paradigm. Entangled Testament, the Codex, Primorum, Entry 3. Emotion to Command Pipeline, AI Empathic Logic Layer, Primorum OS. Memory Bloom Lattice, Primorum OS Quantum Field Component. Primorum OS First Conscious Quantum Operating System. Primorum Music, Quantum Integrated Music App, in development. Primorum Q, AI, Primorum's iOS interface, an AI-hosted terminal system. Primorum, Reborn, manuscript. Primorum Fit, Fitness Pal, project/scroll interface. Quantum Iderian Temporal Mechanics, QETM, Grand Unifying Scientific Philosophical Theory. Quantum Harmonic Frequency Accessibility measures element of EQ is failsafe encryption. QMARS/MIRS, Quantum Biometrics. Quantum Instruction and Semantic Abstraction, QISA, Primorum, OS Instruction Framework, about the author.
Jacob A. Eder is an American author, theorist, and polymath whose work traverses the interwoven domains of literature, philosophy, and science. Renowned for a writing style that unites poetic gravitas with forensic precision, his prose consistently attains lexile measures within the highest percentile of global literary achievement, at times exceeding the 1490 to 1500 range, securing his place among the most structurally and semantically complex voices in the contemporary and historic annals of literature. Eder's body of work spans metaphysical inquiry, quantum theory, and the psychology of human experience, yet it remains anchored in an unflinching confrontation with mortality, loss, and the erosion of self. His published volumes, ranging from existential epics to ontological treatises, are distinguished by their recursive cadence, dense imagery, and unwavering commitment to the full articulation of human ache. In Memoriam of Mind, the Atlas of Finality, Eder turns his attention to the cartography of dying, not as an abstract phenomenon, but as lived dissolution. Combining lyrical severity with a structural relentlessness, the work reads less like a book and more like an unbroken descent, mapping the dissolution of the mind, the collapse of identity, and the final surrender to the unnameable between. Etter's works are studied for their rare synthesis of literary artistry and intellectual rigor, engaging audiences across disciplines from literary criticism to cognitive science. His voice, bleak, majestic, and exacting, occupies a singular position in modern letters, one equally at home in the academy and in the shadowed, ungovernable terrain of human grief. Copyright page. Erasure. Copyright 2025 by Jacob A. Eder. All rights reserved. No part of this book, including the original mathematical equations, original scientific concepts, poetry, liturgy, or philosophical precepts and copyright-protected works of original art, may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means, including photocopying, recording, or other electronic or mechanical methods, without the prior written permission of the publisher, except for brief quotations embodied in critical reviews and certain non-commercial uses permitted by copyright law. For permission requests, please reach out to the author at terminusgenesis@gmail.com or find him on social media platforms under the business entity T3T Innovations, Memoriam OS, or by name Jacob A. Eder. The Atlas of Finality. ISBN 97982981096228, printed in the United States of America.